starting off with a room full of people screaming for their lives while our guy has his eyes shut tight, trying to block out the sounds of everyone crashing out around him because his head feels like it's being split open with a rusty axe while people are crying for their parents in the dark. And as he finally forces one eye open, he notices some sketchy purple symbols glowing right under his hands, looking like he just accidentally started a ritual that erupts into a blinding light, revealing this SSS tier baddie with a crown who just manifested out of thin air like she owns the place. Before he can even process the waifu situation, a massive horn monster with glowing red eyes shows up to ruin the entire mood. Dripping saliva and looking like it hasn't eaten in 3 business days, which has everyone in the room losing their minds and screaming about how it can't be real. Including this one older dude who is trying to gaslight himself into thinking this is all a prank, because his brain literally cannot handle the fact that monsters exist. While Lee Kyong is standing there in a cold sweat, trying to figure out how he went from his living room to this death trap in the blink of an eye. Since just a few minutes ago he was minding his own business, eating a quiet meal in the comfort of his own home with 0 problems. Until his phone buzzed with a game invitation that looked like some generic gacha bait, asking him if he wanted to participate. And being the degenerate gamer he is, he actually clicked yes on a random pop-up like it wouldn't have life-altering consequences for his physical safety. Which is the last thing he remembers before waking up in this nightmare with a headache that makes a hangover feel like a spa day. Surrounded by a crowd of NPCs banging on the walls and crying about how cramped it is while a massive magic seal glows on the floor. So he grabs the nearest blonde dude with freckles just to make sure he hasn't finally slipped into a permanent fever dream. Realizing that the physical interaction feels way too real, meaning he is stuck in this mess with 0 exit strategy and no way to wake up. And just as he is questioning his life choices, that same glowing woman appears again, looking like she is about to drop some heavy lore on the survivors. As the whole room turns into a vortex of fire and light, revealing the true terrifying face of the monster that has been growling in the distance. And she hits them with the classic "Welcome to the Other World" speech, thanking them for accepting an invitation they didn't even know was a contract. Telling them they have been chosen as heroes to save a dying continent, which sounds like a massive scam to everyone currently fearing for their lives. But then she drops the real bombshell, looking Kyong right in the soul, while she explains that not everyone is making it out of this room. Because the tutorial is basically a filter, and only the small percentage of people who don't die horribly actually get the right to move on. Which sets the tone as we see a girl crying her eyes out while a cold-looking dude with blue eyes just stares into the void, already accepting the stakes. While Alicia explains that this glowing pyramid is just a start point, which is basically the lobby before a battle royale begins, where they are provided with basic supplies like bread and water along with some low-tier weapons that look like they would break after one hit. And she mentions that everyone will get a class or a unique trait, which is the only hope these people have of not becoming monster snacks. So Kyong picks up a spear, looking like he is reconsidering every decision he has ever made up to this point in his life. Just as the massive barrier protecting them starts spiderwebbing with cracks, signaling that the safety timer is about to hit 0 for everyone. He is looking at the wall like he is about to see his life flash before his eyes, because that barrier is definitely not holding. While Alicia keeps talking about maximizing personalities and growth like she is not watching a slaughter about to happen in real time. Telling everyone to say the words "status window" if they want to see just how much the world is about to nerf their potential. So he shouts it out, and a golden UI manifests in front of him, showing his name, age, and the fact that he is currently classless. His stats look like a total disaster, with his magic power sitting at a crisp 0 while he tries to figure out if he is already cooked. Wondering if having 10 strength is enough to survive, or if he is basically a level 1 slime in a dungeon full of high-level bosses. But then a system notification pings telling him he just unlocked a heroic rank trait called Mind's Eye, which changes everything, as it instantly floods his vision with dozens of floating status windows for every single person currently panicking in the room, allowing him to see the hidden potential of the crowd while they are all busy freaking out over their own mid-tier stats and lack of hope. Scanning through the room and watching people realize they are basically fodder for whatever is waiting behind that cracking wall. As he sees one guy getting hit with the growth limit tag, which is basically the system telling him he has already peaked and it's over. While another person realizes their overall rating is just average, which is the polite way for the system to say they are a background character. But then he looks at his own evaluation and gets hit with a violation so disrespectful it reminds me of when my ex told me I was just okay, right before she blocked me on everything. Telling him his talents are the worst, and that no matter how hard he works he will always be a third-rate fraud who can't escape his rank. And the system basically tells him not to even bother picking up a sword because the result of him trying to fight is already obvious. Which leaves him standing there in a cold sweat, processing the fact that the world itself is calling him a loser before the game even starts. Surrounded by people shouting for their lives and begging for a savior that clearly isn't coming to help them out of this mess. But Kyong isn't about to just roll over and die because a status window hurt his feelings, so he starts looking for a way to cheat the system. Just as the wall finally gives way and a massive brown-skinned monster with glowing eyes breaks through to start the massacre. And a whole pack of those things flood the room, screaming like they are at an all-you-can-eat buffet, and the humans are the main course, turning this start point into a slaughterhouse while people scream for help that nobody in this room is capable of giving. And in the middle of the chaos we see a guy with reddish-brown hair looking like he is about to have a heart attack from the pressure, shouting at everyone to grab a weapon and fight back if they don't want to end up as a snack for these creatures. But Kyong isn't looking at the monsters, he is using his mind's eye to scan this dude named Park Dyaku to see his hidden potential. And he sees that this guy actually has a 30 in dexterity, which is the exact kind of high-tier stat he needs to survive this mess. So he drops this dark predatory smile, realizing he just found himself the perfect meat shield to carry him through the entire tutorial. This tan-skinned menace with the single horn is out here screaming like his life depends on it, while this random red-haired dude is getting his life flashed before his eyes, begging for a savior that isn't coming. So Kyung does what any rational person would do and tells Dyaku to go handle the front lines while he assists from the back. And even though Dyaku is surprised as Hyung is actually down to scrap, Kyung is out here selling the dream, saying they can't just die without trying. But as soon as the words leave his mouth, he's already looking at the situation with that cold predator gaze, thinking about his first move, which is basically just watching a monster lunge with a mouth full of sharp teeth while he does a whole lot of nothing, forcing Dyaku to yell at him to actually do something since he's the one who promised to fight. But Kyung is just out here vibing in the back, muttering and understood while he runs the opposite direction, letting the big man take all the heat while he watches from a safe distance. And you can see the gears turning as he grips that staff, a whole sinister grin spreading across his face because he knows he's the smartest guy in the room, realizing that he just secured the mythic tier meat shield for the tutorial while the actual monsters are out here looking like minor inconveniences. He finally lands a hit on one of these creatures while it's midair, but as soon as the next one lunges, he's back to looking alarmed, which is fine because Dyaku is a total bro and steps in with the shield, immediately asking if his Hyung is safe, like a true loyal NPC. And Kyung is just mentally patting himself on the back for finding someone this useful, telling the big man to keep pushing so they can grab the loot, until they see the glowing exit portal and Dyaku starts celebrating like they just won the lottery. But the mood shifts fast as Kyung starts pleading for help, looking like he's about to be turned into a snack, getting swarmed by these goblin-looking dudes in the red light, looking like he's actually about to crash out for real this time. Sitting on the ground surrounded by a whole horde of them, acting like a damsel in distress while he waits for the real heavy hitters to show up. And right on cue, Hyunsung and Dyaku appear on the scene with the regressor, looking like he's about to deliver a world-class beatdown. As Hyunsung charges in with the spear, moving so fast the monsters don't even realize they're already dead. While Kyung uses the distraction to throw that brown bag he's been eyeing, looking drained, but satisfied with the hustle, clutching that pouch like it's the only thing that matters because he's been plotting on this item since the moment he stepped into this dungeon. As Dyaku runs over shouting for his Hyung, looking like he's ready to die for a guy who just used him as a distraction, while Kyung is back to acting terrified, surrounded by shadowy creatures with glowing eyes like he's in a budget horror movie, letting the monsters grab at him and tear his clothes just to sell the act because he knows the hero is watching, reaching out a hand and begging for his life while the sound of monsters crushing bone echoes through the chamber. This takes us back to the cell where it all started, with a younger Kyung looking like he actually had a soul back then, realizing that his only chance at survival is the massive dude sitting across from him, even if the guy is a bit of a crybaby, snapping at Dyaku when he asks what to do because being trapped in a dungeon cell is a terrible way to spend a Tuesday. But then he switches into gamer mode, explaining that they need to treat this like an RPG with stats and classes if they want to make it out, imagining a whole win screen in his head because he knows that leveling up is the only way to not be a victim in this system. Back in the present, he's checking the supplies and realizing they're actually doing better than most of the other losers in here, until a massive bloodshot eye opens up right behind them, making both of these guys realize they might have celebrated too early. But Kyung notices the beast isn't actually attacking, it's just out here sniffing the air like it's looking for a snack it can't see. So he pops the mind's eye and realizes this voracious demon is basically blind and has the IQ of a brick, signaling Hyunsung to keep it quiet because an easy kill is just free experience points sitting right in front of them. Even though Dyaku is worried, Kyung is already decided on the fact that this monster is about to be deleted from the server, sending Hyunsung in for the kill with the regressor swinging that blade like he's trying to work out some deep-seated trauma. As the monster roars in pain while Dyaku just stands there looking shocked that his Hyung is this cold-blooded. But Hyunsung is in a full-blown frenzy, now hacking away at the beast like it personally owes him money, until the creature finally drops, leaving the two of them standing over the corpse in the dark, breathing heavy from the adrenaline. And the system rewards the hustle with a strength point, confirming Kyung's theory that farming these mobs is the play. So he drops that sinister grin on Dyaku, who is looking at him with stars in his eyes like he just found his new god, putting a hand on the big man's shoulder and gassing him up, telling him that with his endurance stats, he's basically built different. While internally, he's already planning to use this dude until there's nothing left, introducing himself as Lee Kyung with that menace energy, letting Dyaku call him Hyungnim while he starts cutting up the rations to keep the team fed, handing out the items to the group in chibi form, which actually triggers a stat boost for Dyaku because the system loves a good meal. And as he pats Dyaku's cheek, he's basically just checking to make sure his favorite shield is sturdy enough for the next floor, smiling to himself about finally getting a class until a high-pitched scream echoes through the dungeon and ruins the vibe, making everyone freeze up as they look down the corridor, trying to figure out what kind of threat is heading their way. And we see a girl with reddish-brown hair and a pink apron screaming for her life, while a pack of red-eyed monsters looms in the dark. She's running full tilt toward them, begging for a save, while Kyung tells Dyaku it's time to get the hell out of Dodge. But as he looks at her, he starts wondering who this girl even is and why she's bringing a whole army of monsters with her, triggering the mind's eye one more time to see if she's worth the trouble or if he should just let the monsters have her. And the status window that pops up is actually mythic tier, showing a magic power stat that is literally off the charts. leaving Kaiyang standing there like an NPC while Diaku tries to pull him away, but his brain is stuck on the name Younghayan. Because he just realized he stumbled onto a girl with mythic rank magic power, and he's already calculating how to make her his. Kaiyang is out here orchestrating the most dangerous play of his life, shouting at Diaku to get his head in the game because they've got a legendary asset coming around the corner, and even though Diaku is shaking in his boots, he steeled himself just in time to see Younghayan, our top-tier SSS rank waifu, running for her life with tears streaming down her face while a massive muscular pale goblin thuds behind her like a nightmare that just won't quit, and you can see the pure terror reflected in the monster's glowing red eye as it zeroes in on poor Diaku, who takes a heavy blow to the face that definitely would have sent me straight to the emergency room. But the chaos is only just starting as a dark-haired menace in a trench coat enters the chat, moving with the kind of speed that makes you realize he's not even playing the same sport as everyone else, and right as the tension hits the ceiling, Kaiyang realizes the moment to strike is finally here, but Diaku is too busy screaming for his life, warning his Hyungnim about the horde that's currently closing and looking like they're about to turn our resident manipulator into a very messy red stain on the floor until a brilliant blue energy bifurcates the entire room and makes everyone's jaw hit the ground because this mystery man just pulled off a move that belongs in a high-budget anime finale, not a starter dungeon, leaving Kaiyang standing there in a literal bloodbath, trying to process how much power he just witnessed while staring at a sword on the ground that looks way too expensive for this neighborhood, asking himself, what the hell just happened? But as he looks up, he sees the man responsible for the carnage standing there with the most unbothered expression I've ever seen on a guy who just committed mass monster extinction. And as Kaiyang stares at this mystery man, he decides it's time to stop guessing and actually use Mind's Eye, which immediately drops a status screen that makes the entire world stop spinning, confirming his name is Kim Hyunsung. But the part that actually breaks Kaiyang's brain is the title, Regressor of Altinus, which means this dude has basically seen the end credits of the world and decided to go back to the first level with all his cheat codes enabled, and looking at those stats is actually painful because comparing him to Kaiyang is disrespectful, showing off legendary strength and heroic luck that makes our MC stats look like a total joke. And Kaiyang realizes he's standing in the presence of a man who's been through this hell before, which is why Diaku is already fanboying, introducing Kaiyang like he's the main character, even though Hyunsung is the one who just speed blitzed a whole army. But Kaiyang plays it cool, lying through his teeth about being lucky while staring at Hyunsung's legendary swordsmanship trait with the same level of salt I had when my ex posted her new man, and he was 6'4" with a chin that could cut glass. And as Hyunsung looks around with those cold blue eyes, Kaiyang starts wondering if this veteran can sense the prying eyes, so he decides to pivot immediately, putting on the most convincing nice guy mask in history to introduce himself, extending a hand and thanking the man for the save while mentally planning how to drain this regressor for every bit of value he's worth, asking how many survivors are left in this shitty camp Hyunsung is running, which Kaiyang internally roasts as a total pushover move because gathering weaklings is a waste of time, but he keeps that energy hidden because a guy who knows the truth of this world is the ultimate bag to secure, so he feigns awe when Hyunsung mentions he's already got a class, and while they're talking, Kaiyang spots Younghayan sitting in the corner looking like a lost puppy, so he approaches her with a hand outstretched, giving her that gentle hero smile that he knows will work every time, and as she looks up with those big teary eyes, she's already falling for but Hyunsung's reaction to her name is what really gives the game away because he looks happier to see her than a kid on Christmas morning, which tells Kaiyang everything he needs to know about her importance in the previous timeline, making him wonder why this powerful regressor is so invested in a scared girl, so he doubles down on the kindness, asking if he can call her Miss Hyan, while she blushes like crazy, clutching a bloodstained cloth and basically cementing her place as his most valuable while a vision of Hyunsung's past life flickers in the background, showing a man who shoulders the weight of 1,000 sacrifices standing over a field of crosses under a sky that looks like pure apocalypse, proving that this guy is looking to hoard every single beneficial asset he can find to change the future. And Kaiyang realizes that Hyan isn't just a girl, she's a weapon that Hyunsung desperately needs, and as Kaiyang smiles down at her, he's already thinking 5 moves ahead of everyone in this room, labeling her as a magician with latent potential that could level a city, and Hyunsung as the veteran who knows where all the loot is hidden, concluding that both of these people are treasures he's going to keep close until the very end, wearing a grin that is actually terrifying. Look at Diaku, man, bro is out here cheesing like he just found a hidden cheat code because the group finally reached the safe zone, a makeshift camp tucked away in the dirt where people are actually surviving. Diaku asks how he found this spot, and Hyunsung hits him with the most cap-heavy, by accident, you've ever heard. And before Kaiyang can even call out the lie, Hyan comes charging in like a heat-seeking missile for her brother Hyunsung. While this new girl Jaihai slides into the frame with a smile that's about as real as my ex-girlfriend telling me she just needed some space to find herself. Kaiyang doesn't hesitate, immediately popping Mind's Eye to see if this new player is worth the oxygen. And the system basically tells him she's a level 1 NPC with a personality setting labeled egotistical ambitionist, with stats so low the chart looks like a dot, which Kaiyang internally summarizes in one word: trash. He's offended that the system is trying to pair him with another fraud, but he keeps the mask on and asks for names, letting Diaku do the heavy lifting for the social intro, while Hyan stammers out her name like she's still in a tutorial cutscene. Jaihai is standing there with her arms crossed, doing that classic anime girl while she calculates everyone's value. Not realizing Kaiyang is doing the exact same thing to her, though she's already past Diaku because of his muscle aura, while instantly failing Hyen and Kaiyang because they look like low-level baggage that needs carrying. She starts simping for the tank, asking Diaku if he's the one carrying the team, but bro is too loyal and points straight at Kaiyang, which leaves her looking at our man with a spear like she's trying to figure out if he's a secret boss or just a glitch in the system. She claps her hands and starts playing the perfect guide, role splitting the group by gender like she's a camp counselor. And she hits Kaiyang with a "please be nice to me." That would work on any other NPC, but Kaiyang's internal monologue goes full villain mode, smiling back with the same fake energy because he knows a fellow social predator when he sees one. As they walk through the camp, the background characters start losing it, crying about how the heroes are finally here to save them, treating our group like they just dropped a high-tier loot crate into a poverty-tier server. Kaiyang looks at these people with zero empathy, realizing that while Diaku is busy being a man of the people, he's just a meat shield in waiting. Sun comes up on the next day, and we see the reality of the situation. A bunch of survivors huddled together in a forest clearing. As Hyunsung checks in on the boys, and Diaku wakes up feeling like he just had a full 8 hours in a 5-star hotel. But Kaiyang is already locked and skipping the small talk to ask the one question that actually matters. How is this place even running? Hyunsung admits the situation is cooked, and this random dude confirms that the food and water are basically at zero. So Kaiyang decides to be the one to say the quiet part out loud, pointing out that 30 extra mouths is just a death sentence, which triggers Hyunsung's hero complex, his eyes glowing like he's ready to crash out just for the sake of the NPCs. Kaiyang doesn't blink, doubling down on the fact that he isn't a volunteer, while Diaku looks on like he's watching his parents divorce. He clarifies that he isn't leaving, just that standing around in a stagnant camp is the fastest way to get nerfed by starvation. The silence in this panel is heavy, with Kaiyang just staring into the void of his own pragmatic soul, until Hyunsung breaks the tension, looking at the duo and realizing that even if they're selfish, they're the only ones with actual fight IQ. Diaku gives that big-hearted smile, and Hyunsung finally lets out a breath, thanking them for not just dipping on the group. Kaiyang puts a hand to his chest and plays the "I understand you" card, admitting he gets the hero vision even if he doesn't share it, openly telling the regressor that he's a selfish dude who doesn't do the whole power of friendship thing for free. And instead of a lecture, Hyunsung just nods, proving he's been through enough timelines to know that a selfish ally is better than a dead one. Kaiyang hits him with that devious grin, realizing he doesn't have to play the saint anymore, because the regressor is ready to talk business, proposing that his group joins whatever endgame raid Hyunsung is planning for the future. Because at the end of the day, Kaiyang isn't about to let a regressor hoard all the wealth and power while he sits in the background like an extra. Kaiyang is out here trying to secure his spot in the endgame, telling Hyunsung that if there's a master plan for the future, he and his squad need to be on the guest list. And honestly, the way Hyunsung just stares back makes it feel like he's checking Kaiyang's credit score, which triggers a flashback to the start point where that royal baddie Queen Alicia dropped the most mid-tier lie ever, claiming that survival was the only goal. But Kaiyang's brain is wired differently, and he realizes that survival in a death game is a scam designed to make people play nice while they slowly run out of time. Because the only way to actually win is to monopolize every single resource, meaning that dragging 30 NPCs around is basically a one-way ticket to a game over screen. Since those poor souls aren't going to be killed by monsters, they're just going to starve in the dark while the high levels hoard all the bread. And when Kaiyang drops this cold-blooded logic, Hyunsung doesn't even flinch, just gives him this devious little smirk like he's glad someone finally said it out loud. But they shake on it, and while Kaiyang is playing the role of the reliable ally, he's internally laughing because he's only here to leech off the regressor's cheat codes. But even Hyunsung's gaze has shifted because he's finally clocked that while Kaiyang's physical stats are straight-up garbage, his utility as a high IQ administrator is the only thing that's going to keep this ragtag group of survivors from folding under the pressure. And we immediately cut to the dungeon, where the vibes are immediately violent, with a massive tusked monster and a horde of goblins turning the chamber into a mosh pit. Diaku is in the middle of it, straining against a beast that looks like it skipped every leg day in history, but still has enough power to crush a normal human. So he screams for his Hyung, and Hyunsung doesn't hesitate, charging into the fray with his dark coat flapping like he's the main character of a Souls-like. And then he lets the blade eat, swinging with this brilliant blue energy that looks like it cost the animators their entire yearly budget. As he connects with the monster's skull, the impact is so heavy you can practically feel the frame rate dropping from the sheer amount of particles. Hyunsung lands in a crouch, looking like a total menace, while the ink-black shadows of his kill splatter across the stone floor. His eyes are glowing with that intense, "I've seen the end of the world" blue light, proving that his combat prowess is on a completely different tier than everyone else. While some random monster in the background lets out a death rattle that sounds like a corrupted audio file, staining the entire room in a deep, bloody red. Until the dust settles, and Hyunsung is just standing there, sword held upright, looking like he just finished a casual tutorial mission instead of a life-or-death struggle. And Kaiyang is watching from the shadows with a monocle and a fan, looking like a Victorian villain who just realized his investment is finally paying off. He steps out with a spear, acting like he's actually helping, and notes that the monster density near the start point is suspiciously low, which Diaku points out is probably because Hyunsung went on a solo genocide run before they even woke up, asking if the dude was a pro fencer back on Earth. Kaiyang just shrugs, suggesting it's either natural talent or the fact that Hyunsung has already secured a high-tier class that's buffing his every move. And that word class hits Deaku right in the feels, making him look down like a puppy that just realized it's the only one at the park without a toy. So Kyung does what he does best and manipulates the big man's emotions, putting a hand on his shoulder and telling him he was the real MVP of the fight. And it works like a charm, with Deaku getting all teary-eyed because he's a simple soul who just wants validation from his genius leader. But then the air starts shimmering and a golden interface pops up right in front of them, flashing the word class like a jackpot on a slot machine. And the system basically tells them it's time to stop being NPCs and pick a role, opening up a list of paths that are about to change their lives. Kyung is out here grinning like he just found a glitch in the Matrix, because this awakening is happening way faster than he calculated. Until he sees it, a golden icon for a commander class that's labeled as a rare grade, which is a massive step up from the common trash options. The system breaks it down, showing the warrior class for the meatheads who want to swing metal, and the archer class for the people who want to stay safe in the back. Then there's the magician, which is tempting because it opens up the alchemist path, but the stat requirements are probably higher than Kyung's current luck. And as he imagines himself in these different roles, he keeps coming back to the commander, a class with zero combat ability, but a wider field of vision for tactical plays. Hyunsung walks over noticing the glow, and Kyung casually mentions that he's got the basic combat classes and this weird rare grade commander option. And even the regressor looks surprised because a rare grade dropping this early in the tutorial is like finding a legendary item in a wooden chest. Deaku instantly flips out, shouting that commander is the only title worthy of Kyung, acting like he's about to start a fan club on the spot. He starts hallucinating a vision of Kyung in a red cape waving a hand, while the rest of them do the actual work, which is honestly exactly what Kyung wants. But Hyunsung is playing the buzzkill, pointing out that combat classes give a bigger stat boost from the jump, which makes Kyung wonder if the regressor is trying to nerf him. And the two of them start bickering like a married couple, with Hyunsung pushing for the safety of the archer class, while Deaku is screaming for the commander hype. It turns into a full-blown chibi argument in the middle of a dungeon, with Hyunsung insisting on long-range support and Deaku begging to be commanded. And Kyung is just standing there with a fake smile, looking at these two powerhouses fighting over his future like he's a prize at a county fair. But he takes a second to actually look at the screen, realizing that the choice he makes right now is going to dictate how he survives the rest of this nightmare. He looks at the commander icon one last time, decides that being the brain is better than being the arrow, and reaches out to press the yes button. And a massive pillar of golden light erupts, swallowing him whole and sending ripples of energy through the entire camp like he's ascending to godhood. The other survivors are shielding their eyes, wondering if their resident tactician just blew himself up or if he actually secured the upgrade they need. And as the light fades, Deaku and Hyunsung are both shouting at the top of their lungs, desperate to know if he picked the hype or the safety. Deaku and Hyunsung are losing their minds, screaming at him to find out if he picked the archer safety or the commander hype. But Kyung just takes a second, touching his face like he's in a K-drama, before flashing a smile that says he's about to disappoint everyone. As he drops the bomb that he's officially a magician, which sends Deaku into a blue-tinted depression because his commander fantasy just got folded. And while Hyunsung is looking for a logical explanation, Kyung is laughing it off like a casual choice, even though internally he's calling them punks for thinking he'd ever pick a class that requires actual cardio. Because the math is simple. Commander was a bait with only one extra stat point, whereas the magician path is the only way to fix his zero-tier magic situation. And since his magic power was a flat 0, getting a +3 boost is a major merit for his specific brand of weakness, which triggers a massive download of forbidden knowledge into his brain, making him feel like he's finally stacking some actual power instead of just faking it. So he pulls up the UI to check the receipts, looking at his intelligence hitting 19 and his luck staying at that heroic 21. Only for the system to remind him that he's still mid and shouldn't get his hopes up, which is the AI version of a ratio. But he doesn't care about the system's opinion as long as the stats are usable, so he turns his attention to Deaku, who is still rotting on the floor like an NPC, asking the big man if he's picked a path, yet only for Deaku to start stuttering about wanting to be a priest or a shield warrior. But before he can even finish that sentence, both Hyunsung and Kyung hit him with the synchronized shield warrior command, leaving no room for debate. And after the light show of the class awakening fades, Kyung leans in to make sure the decision is finalized, which it is, as Deaku holds up his new shield with the biggest, most oblivious smile you've ever seen on a man being exploited. And Kyung is out here, giving him fake congratulations while celebrating the fact that he just secured a permanent high-endurance meat shield. So they decide to wrap up the dungeon run, but Hyunsung stops them to ask about the distribution of the bags they secured earlier. And even though Kyung tries to play it cool by saying they don't need much, the regressor forces a bag into his hands and tells him to go be a hero, which forces Kyung to pull out his best humbled face, bowing his head, while Deaku cheers for Hyunsung's nobility like a true fanboy. But as they head back to the survivor camp, the vibe shifts from heroic adventure to post-apocalyptic Hunger Games, with girls like Hayoung complaining about the wait time like they're waiting for a DoorDash order in the middle of a death zone. And then we see Lee Jae-hai, who is out here moving like a social mob boss, offering a piece of her leftovers to a starving beggar. But she's got that cold, predatory look in her eyes that tells you she isn't doing this out of the goodness of her heart, as she breaks the bread in half, making the poor dude think he's finally getting a win, only for her to drop the pieces right on his head, calling him a glutton for not working, while the background turns blood red to show her true aura. And she's just standing there smiling at the disrespect until she notices the main trio walking back into camp, where the entire crowd starts cheering for Hyunsung like he just dropped the hottest album of the year. But Kyung isn't interested in the fan service, handing over the communal bags while making sure he keeps his own stash hidden. And when some old dude with glasses tries to take his personal luggage, Kyung hits him with the deadpan stare, instantly swerving the man and walking away because he's not about to let some random NPC touch his hard-earned loot. Even when Deaku asks if they're really going to be this stingy, Kyung reminds him that they aren't running a charity. Because in his head, if these people want to eat, they need to pick up a sword instead of waiting for a handout. While Jaihai is back to her sweet girl act, blushing and playing the part of the camp's angel for the audience. But Kyung sees right through the mask, realizing Jaihai is the shadow CEO of this camp who does whatever she wants, ruling over the weak like a queen on a throne, while Hyunsung is busy playing the virtuous hero. And as he watches the survivors laugh and eat, he realizes the social hierarchy here is more dangerous than the monsters. His gaze eventually landing on Young Hyan, who is out here struggling with a rock while looking like she's on the verge of a breakdown, especially since Deaku is currently scolding her for being a liability, making her apologize for basically just existing. And Kyung smiles because he realizes this is the perfect setup to swoop in and be her only source of validation. So he calls Deaku over, reminding him of the girl they saved yesterday to plant the seed for his next move, handing over a bag of food and telling Deaku to go play the kind oppa role while keeping a close eye on her. And Deaku is all smiles, thinking he's doing a good deed, while Hyan is in the background looking dejected as hell, as Kyung imagines himself as her ultimate savior, the only person she can lean on in this cruel environment. Dropping the kind Hyung mask for a split second to give us a look that is pure villainy, satisfied that he's about to own a legendary asset. But as Deaku approaches to deliver the goods, he suddenly freezes because someone else has already entered the chat. Some random guy with glasses who is out here offering Hyan bread before Kyung's plan can even get off the ground. And Kyung's face shifts from master strategist to, I'm about to crash out, because this variable wasn't in the script. Leaving us with the one question that's currently burning through his brain. What is actually up with this punk? Sikwoo is out here with the most NPC energy possible, smiling at Hyan, but Kyung is already clocking the vibe shift. And even Hyunsung is looking like he's about to crash out, wondering why some low-level fraud is approaching his precious treasure like he actually has a chance. He knows the game. Nobody in this death trap is acting nice for free. So while Deaku is panicking in the background, Hyunsung is just analyzing the sheer audacity of this man, eventually telling everyone to just keep moving because he's got bigger fish to fry than some thirsty survivor with a loaf of bread. But Kyung isn't letting it slide that easy, pulling up on Hyan with his own supply, acting like he just happened to have some extra bread because he's tight with Jaihai. Then we see the competition Sikwoo sliding in with a loaf of his own, catching Hyan off guard while she's just trying to exist. This man is really on one knee like he's proposing, telling her not to reject his kindness because she looks tired, and Hyan, being the sweetheart she is, actually falls for the act. She's looking at him like he's her new best friend, thinking about how thankful she is that these nice guys are around to save her from the apocalypse. In her head, this dude is basically a K-pop idol surrounded by roses and sparkles, which is a wild delusion, but that's the trauma talking. She's out here eating the bread with hearts in her eyes, wondering what Kyung is up to, while Sikwoo prepares to drop the most nice guy line in history. He hits her with the, I want us to be in a closer relationship line, and Hyan, bless her soul, thinks he's just talking about being good friends. But the second she agrees, the vibe goes rancid as he reaches out and grabs her arm with an intensity that immediately triggers her fight or flight. She's telling him to let go, visibly shaking because the nice guy mask is slipping faster than my grades in high school. He's gripping her wrist so hard it's definitely leaving a mark, sighing like she's the one being difficult for not understanding the transaction he just initiated. Look at this face, he's genuinely annoyed that she's dense enough to think a loaf of bread didn't come with a price tag. He asks her if she thinks he's doing charity work, and you can see the terror in her eyes as the red background starts bleeding into the scene. This clown actually grabs her by the hair, forcing her to look at him, while he explains that if he gives her something, he expects something back. Hyan is screaming as he looms over her in the shadows, calling her a stupid girl for not realizing that in this shelter nothing is free. But before he can do anything else, Kyung appears out of the dark, grabbing the man's wrist and telling him to let go if he wants to keep his hand in one piece. Sikwoo is stunned, asking, who is this bastard? While Kyung gives him the coldest look of the entire series. Then comes the heavy artillery as a hand literally strikes with enough force to generate sparks, and Deaku enters the chat looking like he's about to end this man's whole career. Deaku is not playing, grabbing him by the neck and calling him trash, while Sikwoo realizes he just picked a fight with the wrong squad. He gets slammed into the dirt so hard his glasses are probably in another dimension, and Hyan is just standing there in shock. The noise draws the whole camp, including Jaihai, as everyone starts whispering and wondering what kind of drama is going down now. Sikwoo is losing it, screaming about blood like he's never been punched before, making a huge scene in front of the witnesses. And for some reason, Deaku is the one crying now, while Jaihai tells him to stop forcing the tears because he barely even touched the guy. The atmosphere is still heavy, and Hyan is begging everyone to stop before things get even more out of hand. Jaihai rushes in to play mediator, asking Sikwoo if he's alright, while the crowd watches the most toxic love triangle in the tutorial unfold. She reminds Deaku that in-group violence is against the rules, but Deaku is standing his ground because he saw exactly what this creep was doing. Sikwoo tries to deny everything, acting like he's the victim, and even Jaihai looks confused as the stories start clashing. He's out here stuttering about a misunderstanding, touching his glasses, and trying to spin a web of lies to save his own skin. He claims Hyan answered positively to his advances, and Jaihai turns to Hyan, demanding she stop hiding and explain herself. The crowd starts buzzing with the worst kind of rumors, wondering if these two guys are fighting over some girl who's just playing the damsel role. Look at the silhouettes. The crowd is judging her with those glowing red eyes, and Hyen is starting to realize that nobody in this room is actually on her side. She's crying because she knows she didn't do anything wrong, but the world is just as cruel here as it was back on Earth. You see her phone from back home. Nothing but unread messages from her sisters, confirming that she's always been isolated and neglected. A single tear hits the ground as she tries to tell her truth, but her voice is shaking too much to even make sense. She explains how Siku grabbed her and said she needed to be good to him to live well, but the way she's crying makes her look guilty to the crowd. Jae-hai sighs, looking completely unbothered by the tears, and prepares to deliver a verdict that's going to break Hyen's heart. She asks if it's true that Hyen agreed to get closer to him, and Hyen has to admit it even if she didn't know what it meant. Now Kyung steps in, but he's not here to comfort her. He's here to lecture her, asking if she thinks crying is going to solve her problems. He tells her and Diaku that they acted thoughtlessly, and Hyen looks like she's just been slapped by the only person she trusted. He says apologizing to him won't fix anything, and then he places a hand on Siku's shoulder, which is the ultimate betrayal. He tells her that Siku is the victim here, and she needs to apologize to him right now, and you can see the light leaving her eyes. He's forcing her to bow down and beg for forgiveness from her own regressor, which is the most diabolical social engineering I've ever seen. She's sobbing, trying to say something, but the weight of the situation is crushing her soul into pieces. And then we see it, Kyung is actually smiling, thinking, now's the time, because he just successfully broke her spirit, so he can own her later. He walks away from the chaos he created, acting like he's just as confused as everyone else, while he secures his legendary asset for good. Kyung steps into the light like he's the main character. He clearly isn't asking what kind of mess he's walked into. Real talk, he wasn't expecting this much drama from a bunch of survivors who should be worried about getting eaten. And while he doesn't care about the he said she said between these two, he knows Hyen is a legendary asset he can't let go to waste. So when Jae-hai tries to act like his best friend, he hits her with a question that makes her entire facade crumble, asking if she's in her right mind before reminding everyone that their shouting is basically a dinner bell for every monster in a 5-mile radius, which immediately sends the NPCs into a panic, leaving Jae-hai stuttering while she tries to regain control of a room that's already moved on. Kyung just keeps the pressure on, pointing out that anyone would be terrified if they were backed into a corner by a mindless mob. And then he puts the target right on her forehead, asking if she's actually willing to bet her life on Siku being the victim here. The look in her eyes says she knows she's been outplayed, and the silence from the crowd is starting to get real loud. Kyung just gives her that subtle predatory smile, because he knows the second she hesitates her authority is dead. He makes sure to mention that Hyunsung wouldn't be pleased with this bullying, which is the ultimate "I'm telling on you" move. The fear of being tossed aside by the camp's strongest fighter is enough to make these people flip their stance in under 10 seconds. Hyen is looking at him like he's the only person in the universe who matters, and honestly, that's exactly what he wanted. Jae-hai tries to scream about how they only met a few days ago, but Kyung just dismantles her logic with a cold analytical tone, asking if a first-time greeting is the same as a sleep with me request, which is such a disrespectful comparison, it shuts the whole camp up. And just like that, the public opinion shifts, with everyone suddenly realizing that Kyung is the only one making sense. Jae-hai is watching her social credit score hit 0, while Kyung just stands there touching his chin like he's solving a simple puzzle. She's asking if he's serious, but you can tell she's really just panicking because her queen status just got revoked. It's that moment of sudden realization where she sees the gap between her manipulative skills and a true social predator. Kyung doesn't even need to say anything else. His expression is enough to tell her that the hierarchy has been officially rewritten. He's basically telling her to look closely at the new reality, because the king of this camp isn't who she thought it was. And the mental image is clear. He's the one wearing the crown, now standing over her like she's just another piece on the board. The clearing goes quiet as he takes charge, looking at the crowd with that unbothered energy that says he's already 3 moves ahead, issuing orders like it's second nature, telling them to treat Siku's wounds and get the camp back in order. He even sends Diaku on perimeter duty, making sure his meat shield is busy while he focuses on the real prize. Diaku is just happy to be included, giving a thumbs up, while Kyung turns his attention back to a blushing Hyen, asking her to come with him for a moment, which is the classic hero saves the damsel move to build that early game loyalty. The NPCs are still gossiping in the background, but their opinions are mid and don't affect the plan at all. Kyung tells her not to listen to them, knowing that isolating her from the group only makes her more dependent on him. He sits her down at a table, setting the scene for a private talk, where he can finally start breaking her down. She's sobbing and apologizing for the trouble, but he just tells her to relax and explain what happened from her perspective. He's listening with his hands clasped, putting on his best "I'm a good guy" performance while he analyzes her every reaction. She starts rambling about how Siku grabbed her, and it's hard for him to even pretend to care about the details. She's crying in chibi mode while he just nods along, waiting for the perfect moment to drop his next manipulative masterpiece. And when she mentions Diakwa hitting the guy, he acts shocked like he hasn't been orchestrating this chaos since day one. Internally, he's admitted that he's not even listening, he's just focusing on his empathetic ability to make her feel validated. She looks at him with those watery eyes, feeling like she finally found the one person in this hellhole who actually gets her. He plays it off like he only did what anyone would do, which is the perfect way to make her feel even more special. She asks why he's helping her so much, and this is where he pulls out the most toxic lie in his entire toolkit, telling her she reminds him of his younger sister, which triggers a memory of a girl who was basically a demon in a t-shirt. The real Lee Jai-hai was out here kicking doors and demanding money, so comparing her to Hyen is the biggest reach in history. But he needs that sympathy, so he keeps the act going while they sit by the fire bonding over their sad family lives. She mentions she has no parents, and he immediately claims they're in the same boat to lock in that trauma bond for life. It's a total scam, and he's loving how easy it is to leave a good impression just by making up some relatable bullshit. He suggests they start talking more comfortably, which is basically him securing his ownership over her future. Hyen is blushing so hard she's practically a different character, finally calling him Appa and falling right into the trap. Now that the bond is sealed, he activates Mind's Eye to see if all this social engineering was actually worth the mana. He sees she's still classless, which is fine because he's about to give her the biggest power-up this camp has ever seen. But then he sees her potential is literally described as monstrous, and he realizes this girl is a walking nuke. He knows he needs to turn her into a magician ASAP, and the look on his face says the real game is finally starting. Hyen slowly creeps up behind him, her voice trembling as she asks if he has a spare second, which immediately alerts Kyung, who knew she'd come looking for him, but didn't expect her to move this fast. So he keeps his composure cool, telling her to run along and give him some privacy with the camp's former queen. And she just nods like an obedient puppy, blushing as she backs off without asking a single question, allowing him to turn his focus back to Jai-hai, casually asking her what's on her mind. While they sit at the wooden table under the dim night sky, both of them putting on their best fake faces, as Jai-hai starts dropping a soft apologetic act saying she's sorry for the entire scene she caused earlier. And Kyung matches her energy, claiming he was just being way too sensitive playing this tedious game of social chess. Even though internally he is exhausted by how hard this woman is to deal with, knowing every word out of her mouth is calculated. Especially when she asks him to let her handle the fallout with Sikwoo, claiming she feels bad for what happened to Hyen. Which makes Kyung play along, reminding her that she's the one running the camp's daily logistics anyway. But before she can think she's won this round, he shifts his tone, making it clear that he expects her to manage her territory so he never has to waste his time stepping in again. Because for physically weak players like them, playing dirty politics is the only way to avoid getting weeded out. Which makes Jai-hai stand up so fast her chair almost flies back, the sudden tension thick enough to cut. But instead of getting mad, she leans right back into his personal space, dropping the innocent act entirely. And she giggles, whispering that she can see right through him and knows exactly what he's trying to pull. Which actually makes his heart skip a beat as her face gets dangerously close, realizing she's a much bigger threat than he anticipated. As she smirks, admitting she has a thing for ambitious men and suggesting they form a much tighter bond, leaving him flustered but trying to play it cool, asking what kind of profit he gets out of partnering up with her. And she just smiles, pointing out that his little display of dominance was just a show to make Hyen rely on him, meaning they want the exact same thing. Which makes Kyung let out a quiet laugh, realizing she's just as toxic and manipulative as he is. And since they both speak the language of pure utility, they agree they are basically cut from the same cloth, sealing their dark alliance with a kiss, locking in a partnership that will run this entire camp from the shadows, meaning that when, a few days later, a massive wooden platform is raised in the middle of the clearing, where Sikwoo is forced to kneel in front of the entire crowd, screaming his lungs out as he begs for forgiveness. Which instantly changes the power dynamics of the camp, making the survivors realize Jai-hai has officially aligned with Kyung. And they start whispering about how untouchable Hyen is now, warning each other to never cross her. While Kyung watches the entire spectacle unfold with a cold, unbothered look on his face, before sitting down with Jai-hai by the fire to give her strict orders on keeping Hyen isolated and dependent. And she just laughs it off, giving him a teasing casual response that he immediately shuts down, as she promises to set up the perfect social environment to make sure Hyen only has eyes for him, leaving him staring at her with a deadpan expression that says he's not here for her games, before he hits her with a cold "nuna" to put her in her place, utterly shattering her smug composure. And as she stammers, he internally praises her political skills, glad he secured such an efficient tool to run his administration, which is why over the next few days he spends hours deep in the forest listening to Hyen cry about her miserable past, letting her trauma bond with him as her sole savior, putting on his best warm, gentle mentor smile. And when he asks if she's managed to cast any basic magic, yet she looks down, acting fully clueless, prompting him to raise his finger and cast a simple ignition spell to show her how it's done, which leaves her staring at the tiny flame with wide, sparkling eyes like he just showed her a miracle, even though his actual schedule is packed since he also has to train with Dyaku to get used to their new classes, while internally cringing at how embarrassingly Chinibu all these basic magic incantations sound. So he tells her she's probably just blocked until she officially unlocks her class. And she just nods, eagerly blushing like a top-tier waifu who is totally devoted, promising her beloved Appa that she will do her absolute best to make him proud. But just as he tries to wrap up their little training session for the day, she stops him, acting all flustered and claiming she doesn't understand what's happening to her body, saying her magic power has been acting strange, which immediately makes him activate Mind's Eye, expecting to see some tiny baby tier stat increase on her screen, only to pause as the golden status window begins to load, and his eyes widen as the system displays her actual stats, showing that she has already unlocked the magician class through a heroic rank method that literally multiplies her growth potential, leaving him standing there in a cold sweat of pure shock while she stands right in front of him, smiling like an innocent angel while claiming she still can't control her magic, which makes him realize with pure dread that his perfect little victim has been lying to his face this entire time, looking at her like he's trying to solve a puzzle that doesn't quite fit. Kyung clocks the way Hyen is staring back, only for her to drop the heavy question about whether he's been playing her this whole time, catching him off guard. But he pivots back to the magic lesson, trying to keep things professional, while she complains about how hard it is. Which is wild because the system is basically screaming that this girl is a cheat code possessing a heroic rank trait. It should make learning magic look like a joke, so he tells her to just manifest a flame like he did. And she focuses up for a second, but instead of a blaze it just poofs out into a tiny cloud of smoke, triggering a full-on sobbing fit about her limits, though Kaiyang isn't buying the tears because he knows game recognized game. And he realizes she's definitely faking the struggle just to keep him around longer, so he tries to wrap it up. But the private session gets crashed by Park Hae-young, one of the camp's social climbers, who's been hovering lately, looking way too comfortable for someone who's just a subordinate, and Kaiyang is already wondering what kind of angle she's playing. As he gives Hyein the "see you tomorrow" special, flashing that fake nice smile that he uses to keep his assets loyal. And it works like a charm, sending Hyein into a state of pure sparkly-eyed bliss, because she's that easy to manipulate. While she floats away on cloud 9, leaving the grown-ups to talk business in the middle of the supply crates. The conversation shifts to the next hunt, with Hae-young confirming they're about to announce the new roster for the team. So Kaiyang decides to shoot his shot and ask for a spot using his mind's eye to check if she's actually worth the investment, seeing those strength and stamina stats that are actually decent for a support-type character in this hellhole. But he plays it cool, pretending to be undecided, while she pushes the idea that they need more real fighters. And when she tries to downplay Hyein as just some little kid, Kaiyang is internally laughing at her audacity for comparing herself to a literal legendary mage, but he keeps the mask on and calls for everyone to gather for the announcement, letting the regressor take the lead because having a high-level tank like Hyunsung Tak makes the weak survivors feel safe. While Kaiyang stands on his soapbox explaining that they can't just sit around and rot if they actually want to survive. As the background noise of the camp starts turning into gossip, with people whispering about how Hyein is just a leech. But inside her own head she's replaying every moment with Kaiyang like it's a high-budget romance movie she's obsessed with. Feeling a little guilty about the lying, but mostly just hungry for the affection she gets when it's just the two of them alone, until Hae-young pops up in the forest clearing like a jump scare to ruin the entire vibe. Immediately going for the throat by calling her a stalker because she can see right through Hyen's innocent act. And she doesn't hold back, calling her stupid for thinking a guy like Kaiyang would actually care about someone so useless. Dropping the "you like him" bomb and watching Hyen's soul leave her body as the realization hits like a truck. Leaning in close to whisper the cold truth, asking if she really thinks she's anything more than a tool to him. And the snicker she lets out is pure disrespect, savoring the way Hyein is starting to physically shake from the stress. Explaining that she only got this far because of luck, and that girls like her are basically invisible to a man like Kaiyang, who sees the world as a chessboard where every single person is just a pawn to be sacrificed. And once a piece stops being useful, he's going to toss it in the trash, without even blinking or looking back. Planting the seed of abandonment so deep that Hyen's entire world starts to look like it's covered in static. As she tries to argue with herself, insisting that her appa is different, while Hae-young just points and laughs at her, telling her she's just easy to use and throw away, a classic victim who falls for the first person who's even remotely nice to her, which triggers a dark memory of her own sisters telling her the exact same thing. And the smirk on Hae-young's face says it all. She's already decided that she's the one who truly fits by his side. Dropping the news that she's already secured a spot on the next hunt, effectively replacing the girl she's currently breaking. And as she walks away, she leaves Hyein standing there in the dirt, completely shattered by the idea of being replaced, with the laughter of the camp echoing in her ears, reminding her of every time she was ever left behind, forcing a single tear to fall as she clings to the image of the one person who didn't look down at her, remembering the promises they made to hunt together and practice every single day until they made it. Revisiting the feeling of his hand on her head, treating her like family instead of just another mouth to feed. And she keeps replaying his voice in her head where he defended her and said he understood her better than anyone. Clinging to that warmth like a life jacket in a storm, telling herself that he truly, genuinely cares for her. But the lies Hae-young planted are already starting to rot her brain, making her desperate to keep him from listening to anyone else, her mind screaming for him not to abandon her like everyone else in her life did. Until the shadows in her mind start to take a physical shape, looming over her like a monster she can't escape, as the voices of everyone she's ever known start merging into one giant mocking chorus about her being boring. And the mental fracture finally happens, with her clutching her head and begging for the voices to just shut the fuck up. As the glass of her psyche shatters into a million pieces, leaving only one singular obsessive thought left in the dark. That she isn't going to let anyone, especially not some mid-tier diplomat, take away the only thing she has left. And the Yandere has officially entered the chat with those glowing red eyes, because Hyein is deadass ready to crash out. A few minutes later, and the whole camp is gathered around the platform like they're waiting for a drop, while Kaiyang steps up, immediately hitting them with the heavy news about the water and food being cooked, basically telling these NPCs they need to stop being dead weight. And to prove he's not just talking, he lets out a casual flame and ignites his hand, giving the crowd that first-person view of actual power, which has everyone in the clearing looking like they just saw a ghost, because most of these people are still stuck in the normal world mindset. But Kaiyang plays it off with that world-class scammer energy, acting like he's just a beginner and no different from the rest of the peasants. While internally, he's reminding himself that fear was his only friend until he realized that facing the monsters is the only way to get paid. He sells them the dream of proactive cooperation, making it sound like they're all in this together when he's really just building A meat shield army, but the crowd is eating it up, cheering like they didn't just sign up for a 24/7 shift in a slaughterhouse. As Hyunsung watches from the side, probably thinking about how much easier it is to lead people when you have a professional liar doing the PR. So Kyoung officially announces the trial run, calling out Young Hyun and this freckled diplomat named Park Hae-young to join the next expedition. But once the crowd clears the kind Hyung, mask falls off faster than my grades in high school, and he corners Hae-young with a look that could freeze the sun, asking her if she really thought he didn't notice her putting hands on his legendary tier mage earlier that day. He delivers a low-key death threat, telling her that if she touches Hyun again, her life in this camp is going to become a living hell. Before instantly flipping back to that sparkling, sparkly-eyed smile that is actually more terrifying than the threat he just whispered in her ear, leaving the poor girl shaking while he walks away, wondering where his little sister ran off to because he needs to keep his assets close. But when he finally spots her standing near the tree line with the other survivors, he stops dead in his tracks because the girl's face is twisted into something out of a nightmare, her eyes glowing a predatory red that makes my own sanity start to slip. And for a second, Kyoung's heart nearly stops, realizing he might have accidentally groomed a literal demon instead of a loyal waifu. As the atmosphere gets heavy enough to crush bone, and the people around her start looking confused, like they can feel the air turning to ice, leaving Kyoung sweating bullets and trying to convince himself that he's just seeing things because he's been reading too much into her. Till Hyunsung walks up and tells him he looks like trash, advising him to rest up since the big hunt is happening first thing tomorrow. While Hyun just stands there smiling like the sweetest girl in the world, making that red-eyed demon look like a total hallucination. But the jagged borders on his thought bubbles don't lie, and he knows deep down that something is fundamentally broken in that girl's head. And across the camp, Jae-hai is watching the power shift with a frown, realizing her throne is looking a lot like a folding chair now. While Hae-young is still replaying Kyoung's threat in her head, realizing she's been marked by the most dangerous man in the room. And she's biting her finger until it bleeds, cursing the fact that all her hard work social climbing just got reset by a magician. Thinking back to when she was Jae-hai's right hand, helping her keep the other survivors in line back when the hierarchy was simple. But Jae-hai just gives her a cold reality check, telling her she needs to mind someone like Kyoung if she wants to stay relevant. Which Hae-young takes as an insult, asking if she's really expected to just become a servant to a guy who clearly hates her guts. And Jae-hai just hits her with that, if necessary, yes, smile, basically saying that survival doesn't care about your ego or your feelings. So Hae-young settles into a state of pure desperation, realizing she needs to secure some insurance before she gets discarded like yesterday's trash. Watching from the shadows as Kyoung takes control of the entire camp's narrative in less time than it takes me to order a pizza. And the jealousy starts rotting her brain, terrified that she's going to end up ranked below a useless girl like Young Hyun. Until she's literally face down in the dirt, resolving that she has to make Kyoung like her by any means necessary to survive. With her eyes wide and bloodshot, looking just as unhinged as the girl she's trying to replace, because the tutorial changes everyone eventually. And by the next morning, the party is geared up and ready at the clearing, with the torches casting long flickering shadows on the stone. As Kyoung takes the lead, with Deoku positioning the new recruits in the back, where he can keep a very close eye on them, while Hyunsung gives the final briefing, making sure everyone knows that a single mistake out here means a one-way ticket to the void. And Kyoung steals one last glance at Hyun, who's just standing there looking like a SSS tier waifu without a single care in the world, convincing himself that the crazy expression from the night before was just his own exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. While Hyun blushes and smiles, and Hae-young is already throwing out heart icons like she's trying to start a romance subplot mid-dungeon. As Hyunsung gives the word, and the group finally sets out, their boots clicking against the pavement as they head into the dark. But the narrator's voice drops an octave, letting us know that Kyoung had no idea how terrifying this specific trip was going to be. The screen fades into a dark, bloody mess, signaling that the conquest they wanted is about to cost them more than they have. The dungeon crawl kicks off with a whole pack of low-tier trash mobs charging in. But Kim Hyunsung doesn't even let them breathe, instantly clearing the front line with clean blue-tinted sword strikes, while Kyoung acts like he's actually struggling in the back to keep up his weak magician act, allowing the heavy hitters to do the heavy lifting while the girls watch the show. Until Park Deoku starts complaining about the sheer volume of these small fries, sensing that something is off, which is exactly when Kyoung spots a massive threat and screams a warning to his designated meat shield, as a green-skinned skull-wearing, orc-looking beast drops from the ceiling like a high-tier raid boss, forcing Deoku to brace behind his metal shield as the impact sends yellow sparks flying, sliding him back across the stone floor under the sheer physical weight of the monster, which roars right in his face, while Deoku desperately begs the party to finish it before his guard breaks. Instead of helping his tank, Kyoung decides this is the perfect moment to break Park Hae-young, shoving a spear into her trembling hands, forcing her to grit her teeth in pure disgust as she tries to maintain her high and mighty diplomat persona, only to freeze up in terror as the dark-skinned beast steps into her strike zone, which makes Kyoung smirk behind her back, realizing her tough girl routine is officially over. So he steps up, wraps his hand over hers on the spear shaft, and whispers a cold threat right into her ear, telling her she's dead if she hesitates like this again, before forcing her arms forward, driving the spearhead straight through the monster's chest in a spray of dark blood, keeping his grip firm on her hands so she can't back out while the creature shrieks in its death woes, telling her to think of it as mere meat, proving he is a manipulative menace who will do whatever it takes. As the beast finally collapses onto the cold stone floor, leaving them standing in the bloody aftermath, Young immediately drops to her knees gasping for air as her entire worldview gets shattered. While Young casually walks away telling her this is the first and last time he'll ever help her, reminding her that survival in this dungeon is a solo game and she needs to adapt or get left behind, leaving her with a chilling look that proves he will discard her the second she becomes dead weight, which sends a wave of dread through her spine as she realizes she could easily be the next one on his chopping list. But the moment he faces the rest of the group, Young plays the nice guy again, though his inner monologue is sweating bullets, unaware that Jung Hyun is watching this entire interaction from the shadows with a glowing red eye. As night falls, and the crackling campfire becomes the only source of warmth in this dark stone cavern, where Hyunsung coordinates the night watch thanking Hyun for her work before waking up Dyaku for his shift, who groans but gets up anyway, leaving Young to lie down on his mat with his mind racing, unable to sleep because his brain is running a million scenarios about what happens after this hunt is over, staring into the dark void, trying to map out the exact path he needs to take to stay alive, wondering what kind of hell's cape the continent actually is under that burning orange sky, and why he was dragged away from Earth in the first place before his thoughts drift to the party's regressor, visualizing Kim Hyunsung holding that glowing divine sword hilt, looking back with those intense blue eyes that have seen the end of the world, leading to a sudden dream of Hyunsung facing a massive multi-winged angelic entity on a battlefield of broken swords, which makes Young toss and turn his subconscious screaming at the scale of the threat they're facing, until he suddenly snaps awake in the middle of the quiet stone-walled room, rubbing his eyes in the dim light wondering how long he's been out, only to realize there's a shadow hovering directly over his mat, revealing Jung Hyun staring down at him with wide glowing red eyes. "YouTube, please, it's just a shadow. I am begging you, do not yellow dollar my video over this girl's face," which instantly triggers Young's survival instincts, making him close his eyes tight and pretend he's still asleep, coping hard by telling himself that his precious wizard waifu is a good girl and this is just a drowsy hallucination. Then he hears the rustle of her dress as she kneels down and gently starts stroking his hair, whispering about how cute her lovely appa looks while he's sleeping, her obsession reaching a boiling point, as her face contorts into a terrifying smirk, her red eyes flaring with a possessive light, staring directly into his soul with a fixed smile, vowing that she will never let anyone take him away from her. Young is out here looking like he hasn't slept since the Clinton administration, just letting out a heavy sigh, which catches the attention of Hyunsung, who asks if he's holding up okay, but our boy puts on the mask claiming he's fine, while the rest of the group trails behind him in the dim light of the corridor. And while Dyaku is busy whispering sweet nothings to a very shy-looking Hyun, Young is picking up on a vibe that feels like a literal death omen, wondering if the sudden drop in temperature is because he's been spending too much time around Young lately, or if it's just the classic smell of jealousy in the air, but he shakes it off to focus on the immediate stakes, suggesting they keep moving deeper into the dark to see if they can find the source of the magic. And even though Dyaku is hype and ready to go, Young's internal monologue is screaming that he needs to double-check the loyalty of his most dangerous assets. Watching Dyaku walk ahead with his hands behind his head like he's on a casual stroll in the park instead of a stone-walled slaughterhouse. So he waits for the perfect moment, locking eyes with a small loose stone on the floor while walking right next to Young. And he takes the bait, intentionally tripping over the rock with a perfectly timed "ah," only for Young to reach out and steady him, acting all concerned about his safety, while Young is internally calling her a bastard for even touching him, because the second she makes contact, the air behind them turns into a purple-tinted nightmare with a demonic manifestation of Hyun's obsession looming over the group. And Young's soul basically leaves his body when he sees Hyun's eyes glowing with that "I will delete your bloodline" energy, confirming she's officially crashed out over his safety, leaving him spiraling because he wanted a simple sibling dynamic to farm her magic power, not a high-intensity relationship with a girl who looks like she's about to sacrifice the whole party for a head pat. While Young is standing there seething, her eyes glowing with her own brand of malice as she realizes Young is just using her as a social tool, vowing over a pile of skulls that she's going to wait for the perfect moment to see how long he can keep looking down on her before she pulls the rug. But the group keeps pushing forward into the brick-walled depths, the orange torchlight flickering against the shadows of whatever is waiting for them, as Young tries to focus, rubbing his eyes and convincing himself that the demonic hallucinations are just a side effect of the dungeon's atmosphere, until Dyaku tells everyone to pipe down, warning them that the things living in these walls have ears like a Discord mod listening for a ping, which prompts Young to flex his new magician knowledge, explaining that he can sense a weak flow of magic power coming from the path ahead. But Dyaku is too impatient to wait for the lore drop, charging forward with his shield raised like he's trying to speedrun his own funeral. And the look on Young's face says it all. He's realized they just stepped into something they weren't supposed to see yet. A stone staircase descending into a pitch-black basement that looks like the entrance to a Souls-like boss arena. Hyunsung is out here giving the most mid-tier performance of his life, pretending to be surprised by a secret basement he definitely knew was there from his previous life, leaving Young to pray that Hyunsung never tries to pursue a career in acting, because the only thing he's good at is swinging a sword, though he plays along since this is clearly the entrance to the tutorial dungeon, confirming the bingo moment in his head as they prepare to descend and find the monsters they need to farm for that sweet stat increase, suggesting they play it safe and plan the attack for the next expedition, but he's already eyeing the environment for any tactical advantages, until he realizes they've walked straight into a textbook ambush with 3 massive silhouettes standing in the orange glow of the next chamber, And Jihai is already grinning, assigning the combat roles like she's still the queen of the camp, telling Diaku and Kaiyang to take the first two while she handles the third, which Diaku accepts with a shout, finally getting the chance to show off the gains he's been making as the party's primary meat shield, giving the camera a wide, confident grin that says he's about to do something either very brave or very stupid. And he goes full Captain America, shouting "Hurray!" as he sends his shield flying through the air with enough force to cave in a chest, slamming right into the gray-skinned Cyclops and making it roar in a mix of pain and pure confusion. As the other monsters swarm him, forcing Diaku to brace behind his shield and complain that it's not made of vibranium, while Kaiyang prepares his first real spell, closing his eyes and chanting for the strength to annihilate his enemies, finally tapping into the mana he's been hoarding, unleashing a blaze spell that erupts like a flamethrower, engulfing the Cyclops in a wall of orange-red heat, while Hyunsung enters the fray like a blue blur, his sword trailing energy as he prepares to finish what the others started, moving with a speed that makes the monsters look like they're lagging, his eyes locked on the target with zero mercy, as Diaku holds the line against a massive club, straining every muscle to keep the front line from collapsing, until Hyunsung shouts that it's the last one, calling for Hyeon and Hayoung to join the cleanup crew. But Hyeon just stands there looking confused, and Kaiyang realizes the head count is officially off, asking where the hell Hayoung went, only for Diaku to dismiss it, claiming she probably just lagged behind and will catch up like a generic NPC. The silence is broken by a beam of blue light as a new Cyclops spawns out of nowhere, catching the entire party with their guard down. And Kaiyang is losing his mind because the spawn rate in this dungeon is officially broken, wondering where these bastards keep coming from, just as Diaku takes a massive foot to the chest, getting kicked across the floor with a pained Kahook, leaving Kaiyang wide open as the monster looms over him, its single eye glowing with the intent to turn him into a red smear on the stone, until a sudden blue energy flash cuts through the air, striking the creature before it can land the finishing blow, as Hyunsung slides in to shield his brain and his nuke, his sword braced against the incoming threat. And just as he asks if they're all right, a high-pitched "KYA" echoes through the chamber, making everyone's hair stand on end, which is when Hayoung finally reappears, limping out of the shadows and apologizing for falling behind, with a look that is way too staged, claiming she was just trying to help, but oops, I threw my spear wrong, while Kaiyang stares at her with pure disgust, thinking to himself that this crazy bitch just intentionally sabotaged the whole run, because her scream acted like a dinner bell, and now every monster in a 5-mile radius is converging on their position, forcing a desperate retreat, while Hyeon stands in the middle of the chaos, her eyes turning a deep predatory red as she whispers the word danger, as Hayoung watches them run from the shadows, a mocking grin splitting her face as she calls Kaiyang a repulsive bastard who thought he was a king, flashing back to the camp where she was the one in charge, seething that he ruined her social standing and deciding that if he dies here, he was just trash anyway. But as Kaiyang screams for Hyeon to move, she looks back with those glowing red eyes, and we realize the monsters aren't the ones she's worried about. They're just the first thing she's going to erase for her appa. Lee Kaiyang is out here panicking, yelling at everyone to move, because the vibe in this stone corridor is officially cooked, as a whole pack of these gray-skinned NPCs comes charging through the fire like they're late for a Black Friday sale. So Hyunsung, being the selfless hero he is, pulls out a glowing blue light and tells the group to take a detour while he stays back to become the bait. And Kaiyang is doing the most, screaming at the girls to keep up, while Hyeon just gives him that submissive "yes appa" response. But look at Hayoung in the back, she literally throws up a middle finger with a smirk, because she's been planning this betrayal since they left the shelter. Now Kaiyang is stuck in a corridor with Diaku, wondering if bringing Hayoung was a massive L, but he still thinks he's got his nuke Hyeon around. So he decides to stop running and finally flex that rare grade magician class, starting the chant for a major burn, telling Diaku to watch the show as he gathers every bit of mana he's got to drop a fireball on these monsters. And he lets it fly, the impact hitting so hard it's like a flashbang went off in a closet, sending the monster straight to the Shadow Realm, while Diaku starts hyping up his Hyungnim like he just dropped the album of the year. The hype dies instantly when Diaku asks why the room feels so empty, and Kaiyang realizes the girls are nowhere to be found. He's looking around like he just lost his phone at a concert, realizing that both Hyeon and Hayoung vanished while he was busy playing hero. Diaku is out here apologizing like a lost puppy, but Kaiyang knows his tank stats are too high for him to just not notice two people dipping. And he doesn't care about Hayoung, but if his legendary tier mage gets lost, his entire survival plan just went up in smoke. They start retracing their steps, Kaiyang trying to stay calm, while Diaku swears they were right behind them a second ago. But Kaiyang is sweating, thinking about how even a dull guy like Diaku should have noticed something, which means something unnatural is definitely going on. And then he sees it, the shimmering purple trails of Hyeon's mana, and his internal monologue just starts spamming "no way" over and over. He tells Diaku to search one way while he follows the trail, his gut telling him that his sweet little sister might be a total menace. He's praying to the gacha gods that Hyeon isn't doing exactly what he's imagining, but the atmosphere is already turning rancid. Meanwhile, in a dark stone room, someone is reaching down to pick up a rock, and the energy is feeling real sketchy. Hayoung is standing there smirking, thinking she finally isolated the competition and bragging about how she memorized the paths to get rid of this appa-obsessed kid. But Hyeon just looks at her with those dead eyes, and a purple magical grid snaps into place, locking them both in a cage. Hayoung is panicking, asking why she's here and what kind of high-tier magic this is, while Hyeon just whispers an apology that sounds cold as ice. Bro Young is really out here calling her names while Hyen just calmly starts casting Windblade, the pink aura looking like a death sentence. The wind starts picking up and Young realizes she just brought a knife to a nuke fight as her hair starts flying everywhere. Her eye is dilated with pure terror as she looks up and sees Hyen standing there like the final boss of a horror game. And then the screaming starts, Young begging for someone to save her because her legs just got turned into a jigsaw puzzle. Hyen just looks down at her and says it's useless because she used magic to block out all the sound, so not even the monsters can hear the agony. Young is sobbing asking why Hyen is doing this, but our girl just looks annoyed thinking about how noisy her victim is being. She decides she's heard enough and reaches for a twig, deciding that the first step to peace and quiet is shutting that mouth for good. She drops a pink magical seal right over Young's face, and now all we get are muffled "erp" sounds while Hyen asks her how it feels to suffer. He's smiling like a maniac, telling her that this pain is nothing compared to how it felt when Young tried to take her appa away. Young is thinking, fuck no, as she stares at the ceiling while Hyen just plays with her hair, deciding that letting her live is too much of a risk. She leans in close with that red-eyed gaze, saying she's sorry one last time before she finishes the job. And Young is crying, her whole life flashing before her eyes because she realized she messed with the wrong legendary asset. Hyen starts the final incantation, her face glowing with that magenta mana as she begs for someone to save her in the most ironic way possible. The wind blade comes down, and the room is filled with a dark shadowy impact that ends Young's character arc. But as soon as Hyunsung and Kyung burst through the door, the predator disappears, and the damsel returns in record time. She resets her face to neutral, making sure the mask is perfectly in place before her savior sees the mess she made. Her eye is wide and trembling, looking like she's the one who was just attacked, which is just the most disrespectful part of this whole sequence. YouTube please, it's just strawberry jam on her face. I am begging you, do not yellow dollar my video over this panel. She's just a victim, I promise. Lee Kyung steps into the room only to find his high-value magical asset standing over a fresh bloody corpse. And the sheer panic on Young Hyen's face is a master-level performance because she immediately switches from cold-blooded killer to a trembling victim, which leaves our main man sweating bullets as he realizes he has officially groomed a monster that he cannot easily control. So instead of running away or making a scene, he forces his legs to move forward, dragging his spear across the stone floor. Approaching her with the most calculated gentleness he can muster, asking if she is okay before dropping the million-dollar question about what happened to Young, pointing directly at the severed limbs on the ground to see how far she is willing to push this blatant lie. But when she starts sobbing, he realizes he has to give her an escape route, telling her this is not her fault, allowing her to spin this convenient tale about getting separated and finding the body already mutilated, which he accepts without a single question, only checking if she is physically unharmed so he can salvage his investment, pulling her into a tight embrace while wearing a sinister smirk that would make a cartoon villain jealous. While Hyen is secretly holding a massive grudge, her internal thoughts screaming with pure venom toward the dead girl, her eyes practically twitching with a level of possessive rage that is flat-out terrifying, cursing her out in her own mind for even trying to get close to her precious savior. While Kyung starts building the perfect cover story, suggesting Young must have triggered a lethal dungeon trap, framing it as a tragic accident to ensure the rest of the group does not suspect a thing, wrapping up his perfect cover-up. Except there is one massive flaw in his plan, which is that the physical cuts on the body are far too clean to be from a standard trap. Meaning if the regressor sees this, he will immediately identify it as high-tier magic, forcing Kyung to make a dark executive decision, unleashing his flame wall spell to incinerate the evidence before anyone else can inspect the damage, letting the roaring fire consume the entire room and erase every trace of Hyen's dirty work, while pretending this cremation is actually a respectful gesture because leaving her body behind would be too dangerous. Standing in front of the flames like a true sociopath, convinced that this is the only logical path to survival. As Hyen watches him with a flushed obsessive grin, giggling in the shadows while he realizes he is becoming just as monstrous as her, fully accepting his own moral decay as long as it keeps him alive in this hellhole. Just in time for Park Deoku to burst into the room, shouting in a panic to check if they are still breathing, only to freeze when he realizes Young is nowhere to be found while Kyung maintains a cold, heavy silence, leaving our exhausted protagonist to drag his feet through the dark corridors, asking about the remaining monsters, feeling a massive wave of relief when he hears the regressor is far away right before his physical body starts giving out, stumbling forward as his physical exhaustion catches up to him, forcing him to fake a massive mana depletion to explain his state, which prompts Deoku to suggest setting up camp immediately while Hyen plays the worried little sister to perfection, leaving a heavy silent tension hanging in the air as they retreat deeper into the stone ruins, gathering around the campfire where Deoku sighs, expressing a bit of genuine pity for their fallen companion, only for Hyunsung to shut that down with cold veteran pragmatism, reminding him that Young nearly got them all killed, admitting that losing either of them would have broken his spirit, which suddenly turns the entire atmosphere into a sparkly sentimental scene, making Deoku incredibly embarrassed while Hyen blushes, fully throwing off the dark tone of their actual situation, prompting Deoku to awkwardly excuse himself for a patrol because, let's face it, his internal panic is telling him that being alone with Hyen is a death sentence. Real talk, bro, is sweating like I did when my mom found my search history at age 14. Leaving the two mages alone in the dim firelight, setting the stage for Kyung to run some quick diagnostics, opening his status window to check the physical toll of his recent actions, only to get roasted by the system, which calls his growth microscopic while pointing out his massive intelligence increase. While Hyan leans in close asking if his stats went up, forcing him to keep up his calm, reassuring mentor persona. When he turns his mind's eye on her, he is met with a terrifying system update that lists her tendency as a careful strategist, and an overall rating that reads, "I'm your #1 fan," which is a level of obsessive devotion that leaves him thoroughly confused. So he looks her in the eye asking if she is feeling down about the grim reality of this dungeon, admitting to his own fake guilt just to keep her emotionally dependent on his validation, as she stares back with a dark hollow expression, agreeing that the entire situation was spine-chilling, prompting him to pull her back into a reassuring embrace, whispering how glad he is that she survived, fully committing to whatever lies it takes to survive, while she clings to him with a joyful, unhinged giggle, vowing in her own mind that she will never let go of her precious Appa no matter what. As the campfire burns low, leaving us with the chilling reminder that survival in this world demands the death of your humanity, Kyeong is staring down at Hyan's soft hair, realizing that since things have devolved into a total murder cover-up, his best move to keep this magical nuclear warhead under control isn't keeping things platonic, but playing the romantic lead, and wrapping her around his finger by sliding right into her delusions, which is why she's looking up at him blushing like a high schooler. Until the heavy clatter of steel ruins the mood, with Dyaku standing there looking like a massive, awkward third wheel, who immediately starts smirking and telling them not to play coy because he already knows what's going on, leaving Kyeong wondering what this idiot is talking about. Before Dyaku proudly declares that he's treating Hyan like his future sister-in-law, completely oblivious to the cold sweat sliding down his leader's neck, which triggers a massive realization in Kyeong's head, making him look at Dyaku with deep skepticism because Hyan's hyperfixation suddenly makes sense, as the big man admits that he's been playing matchmaker this entire time, pushing her to claim her man, and proudly boasting about being the undefeated love doctor of Kangwon-do, as if he just secured them a happy ending, vowing to matchmake them to the best of his ability, while Kyeong's soul leaves his body in pure disgust at this dumbass, clenching his fists so hard his veins are about to pop, because this clumsy pig has basically doomed him to a lifetime of placating a Yandere, which is like when my homie tried to set me up with his cousin because we both breathe oxygen, and it ended with her blocking me before we even ordered appetizers, leaving Kyeong to visualize the cheesy romance drama Dyaku created in his head, while the fat warrior continues to laugh like a clown, prompting Kyeong to internally scream in pure rage, vowing to make this pig pay for his unsolicited matchmaking services. But for now, he has to watch the idiot snore peacefully by the campfire, completely unbothered by the psychological damage he just caused. So he kicks Dyaku awake to get ready before turning around to deal with the real danger, sleeping on the stone floor, gently reaching out to wake Hyan, acting like the sweet, caring mentor he pretends to be, only for her to snap her eyes open with a chilling blood-red glow that instantly drops the temperature in the room, sending a massive wave of panic through his chest as he visualizes her smiling over his own bloody corpse, but realizing he has no choice but to double down on the affection if he wants to keep his head attached to his shoulders. So he gently strokes her hair and tells her it's time to get up, which instantly flips her back into a blushing, submissive little sister, allowing him to breathe a sigh of relief even though his back is covered in cold sweat from the sheer terror of her existence, praying that the journey back to the shelter goes smoothly, where Jae-hai is currently living like a queen, getting a massage, sipping on a bad cup of tea while wondering why the hunting party is taking so long to return, until the watchmen spot Kyeong's group emerging from the trees, prompting Jae-hai to push past everyone to inspect the survivors, running out to greet them with her usual practice smile, though she immediately notices the missing party members, asking what happened to Hyunsung and Hayoung, only for Kyeong to casually drop the news that Hayoung is dead, which sends a shockwave of fear through the camp, while Hyan quietly asks to speak with her savior alone, forcing Kyeong to pat her head and tell her to wait inside, knowing damn well he has to keep her away from Jae-hai before she catches another body, leaving Jae-hai to immediately whisper that Hayoung must have tried to play games and paid the price, is a lie, asking how she died, which is when Kyeong drops the pre-packaged lie about monsters and traps, keeping his own dark secret safe. And when she declines the details, he internally celebrates, because dealing with a smart partner who knows when to shut up is a blessing. But the peace is shattered when she explains that a rogue group of survivors left the camp, specifically naming Yusequo, sending a jolt of pure frustration through Kyeong's veins, because he knows these desperate idiots only set out to save their own social status, fearing that their stupid rescue mission is going to drag a horde of monsters straight to their front door, just as the watchtower shouts that the missing group is returning, with Siku walking in with a smug, relaxed smile. The camp immediately falls into a dead, suffocating silence, as everyone notices the massive shadow trailing behind them, and the crowd begins to panic, pointing in horror at the terrifying newcomer who looks like a walking death flag, sending a cold shiver of dread through the onlookers as they stare at the raw, malicious energy radiating from the back, where a massive scarred man with glowing red eyes is looking at them with a sinister, predatory smile, making everyone realize that a brand new monster has just walked right through their defenses. Kyeong is staring in sheer, unadulterated panic, his pupil shrinking to a pinpoint as his eyes lock onto the massive shadow hovering at the gate, where this terrifying stranger is just standing there with a massive scar sliced right through his eye, smiling like a sleep paralysis demon who just found his next victim. And the pressure radiating off this guy is so heavy it makes Kyeong's skin crawl, instantly triggering his survival instincts to sound the alarm, forcing him to lean in close to Hyan, whispering under his breath to figure out exactly how many of Sequa's original rescue team actually survived this disastrous outing. only for her to confirm that out of the entire group, only 7 managed to crawl back alive, meaning the rest of those arrogant idiots got chewed up and spit out by the dungeon, just like Kion predicted. Which is why he immediately pulls up his cheat code, activating his mind's eye to scan the giant standing before him. The second the system window loads, the sheer audacity of what he's looking at makes his heart skip a beat. Because the system is flagging this guy's core tendency as a calculative murderer, which is basically the worst possible spawn to wander into their camp. So he immediately whispers to Jai-Hai to go grab their heavy hitters Diaku and Hyan before masking his panic behind a polite greeting. Catching the murderer entirely off guard for a split second before the guy adjusts his mask, flashing a warm deceptive smile that would fool anyone who doesn't have a status screen. Extending his hand to introduce himself as Young Jinho, while Kion plays along, matching his energy with a polite handshake. Though internally Kion is looking at this dude like how my landlord looks at me when I try to pay rent in Monopoly money, fully aware that this friendly facade is a trap. Especially when Jinho casually mentions that Siku blabbed about Kion's rare magician class, immediately making Kion want to strangle the glasses-wearing idiot for giving away their tactical advantage. While Siku just stands in the background adjusting his glasses, sweating bullets because he knows he just painted a massive target on Kion's back. The tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife as the two groups stand in the sunlit, clearing, sizing each other up. With Kion keeping his eyes glued to Jinho's armed subordinates, realizing these aren't just random survivors. They're seasoned killers who know exactly how to handle their weapons. But the standoff is temporarily broken when Diaku and Hyan run over, their loud, cheerful voices cutting through the heavy silence. Until Jinho looks around the barricaded shelter whistling like a tourist, while casually calling their safe haven a perfect oasis, which instantly triggers Kion's paranoia. Confirming that his luck stat isn't lying to him because every single one of his 5 senses is screaming at him to put as much distance between his party and this smiling psycho, who is currently looking at their defensive setup with a cold, analytical gaze, assessing their strength. Before casually turning to Kion and mocking them, claiming his own people are terrified because of how hostile the camp's welcome is. Forcing Kion to play the diplomatic card, offering a fake apology about everyone being on edge to keep the peace. Before dropping a massive calculated provocation, casually mentioning that he heard rumors about a group of rogue humans hunting other players in the area. Specifically detailing that this murderous gang had an archer and a swordsman, which is a direct, disrespectful call-out to the armed goons standing right behind Jinho. Asking them with a sharp, mocking grin if they've run into anyone like that, which immediately shatters Jinho's friendly mask, freezing the entire clearing into a silent, dark void of pure killing intent, as Jinho realizes Kion isn't just some naive kid, but a predator who already knows his secret. Prompting both sides to quietly ready their weapons, with Hyan already whispering a protective spell under her breath, ready to turn the clearing into a graveyard if anyone makes a move. While Jinho just lets out a low, menacing chuckle, his hand hovering over his blade as he prepares to paint the grass red. But just as the first drop of blood is about to spill, a massive, booming voice echoes from the forest edge, as Diaku yells out in pure comical relief, shouting Hyansung's name and completely ruining the dramatic tension, forcing Jinho to click his tongue in annoyance and quickly paste his friendly smile back on, realizing he can't take on the camp's strongest warrior without warning. While Kion internally notes that irritated tongue clicks, stepping back to welcome Hyansung with a sigh of relief. Introducing the newcomers as Siku's rescue party, only for Jinho to step forward and address Hyansung directly, extending his hand with that same creepy, scarred smile, completely unaware of the hornet's nest he is about to step into. Because the moment Hyansung hears that name, his entire body goes rigid, his shoulders trembling with a silent, terrifying rage, which Kion immediately notices, his analytical mind working overtime as he realizes Jinho has absolutely no idea who Hyansung is. Meaning this isn't a grudge from the tutorial, but a deeply buried trauma from the first timeline, where Jinho was the monster who slaughtered Hyansung's original comrades. And as the regressor's eyes flare with a dangerous, glowing blue light, Kion realizes that the ultimate battle of the first life has just walked right into their backyard. Kion is standing there with his gears turning at Mach 5 speed, his eyes dead focused on the threat, until a random hand taps Hyansung's shoulder, snapping the regressor out of his paralyzing trance so he can shake hands and play the polite host. Which is when Kion pulls up Jinho's status window and confirms this scarred bastard is a certified high-tier threat, prompting Jinho to immediately try and scale Hyansung by asking for his stats, only for the regressor to shut that shit down with a cold refusal. And while Jinho tries to laugh it off, Kion's brain registers the terrifying historical weight of this meeting, realizing Jinho must have been a monster in the first timeline, a dark, shadowy figure who ruled the wasteland with blood on his hands and slaughtered everyone in his path, making him the exact kind of psychopath who would smile while covered in his victims' remains. But right now the bastard is just casually scratching his head, asking if his little group can crash at the camp, even offering up some of their own food as rent, which Hyansung accepts without a single second of hesitation, sending Kion into a brief spiral of silent panic before the rest of Jinho's crew starts introducing themselves. And as one of the names triggers a weird sense of familiarity in Kion's head, he quickly orders Diaku to get these people out of his sight, prompting the big guy to pull him aside in a panic, though Kion tells him to play it cool and just keep a damn close eye on them. While Jinho laughs like a friendly neighbor, leaving Kion to analyze the tactical genius of keeping your worst enemies right under your nose, and realizing that the moment Jinho backed down from Hyansung, he proved he's not just a brute, but a highly calculating threat. a functional sociopath who knows exactly when to play nice, which means he and Kyung actually have a lot of twisted traits in common. So as they head out into the forest, Kyung can't help but celebrate his own absurd luck stat for saving his neck once again. Before he casually leans in to test the waters, asking Hyunsung if he recognized that scarred bastard from somewhere. The regressor admits they met briefly in the past, though Jinho obviously has no clue who Hyunsung is. Which is the perfect cue for Kyung to flash his best customer service wink, offering a fully confidential therapy session, allowing Hyunsung to lower his guard completely as they stroll through the field feeling safe with his tactical partner. But when Hyunsung asks if their own trip went smoothly, the atmosphere drops to zero as Hyun starts sweating and panicking like how I did when my mom asked me why there was a charge for $99 on her card from an anime gacha game. As Kyung drops the heavy news that Hyung is dead, sending a massive jolt of shock straight through the regressor, who immediately demands to know how it happened, completely unaware that he is walking straight into a massive psychological trap. As Kyung spins the lie that some unidentifiable magic took her out, making Hyun look like a trembling, innocent victim in the background. And as he continues the performance with a dark shadowed expression, he sets the stage for his fabricated story, painting a picture of them getting separated in the dark corridors only to find her mutilated body. Knowing damn well that Hyunsung will find the trap explanation suspicious since the regressor knows this dungeon doesn't have any traps. So Kyung covers his face to fake a mental breakdown, claiming he lost his composure at the sight of the corpse, and explains that he burned her body to ash just to save her from the monsters, destroying the forensic evidence of Hyun's crime. Which makes Hyunsung feel nothing but deep pity for him, while Kyung secretly smirks behind his hand because the arrival of a new suspect changes everything. And instead of trying to explain away a magic murder, he can now point the finger at Jinho, who conveniently happens to be a magic swordsman, framing this new rival as the leader of a ruthless gang of killers who must have ambushed her in the dark, securing the ultimate scapegoat and turning his biggest liability into a weapon to destroy his enemies. Kyung is sitting in silence, his fingers tapping rhythmically against his leg, because it has been a hot minute since he dropped the fabricated story about Hyung's death to the regressor, and he knows he has to play this with pure precision, never once whispering Jinho's name as the suspect. Since the entire point of this mental chess match is to let Hyunsung connect the dots himself, allowing our boy to sit back, sip his tea, and act like he is just a harmless bystander. Which is working flawlessly because the regressor has spent the last few days keeping a constant paranoid watch on Jinho's entire faction, perfectly setting up the narrative that Jinho is the real butcher. And since Jinho is already flagged as a future menace, a certified psychopath in Hyunsung's past life, there is zero reason for the regressor to let him slide, leaving only one real question. How does Kyung trigger the execution? He casually brings up the underground stairs dungeon, playing on their previous failure to lure Hyunsung into a high-stakes conversation, and suggests they run it back by utilizing the raw firepower of the new guys, especially now that Hyun has officially awakened her magic and is ready to act as their personal pocket nuke, which immediately forces Hyunsung into a corner because he has to weigh the tactical benefits of extra muscle against the threat of sleeping next to a snake. Knowing damn well a joint raid means the group will naturally split into two distinct factions, which is the exact tactical opening Kyung needs to isolate Jinho's squad. So he drops the ultimate guilt trip, reminding the regressor that they cannot afford another tragedy like Hyung's, which is a direct hit to Hyunsung's savior complex, effectively presenting a golden opportunity to execute a suspected murderer and erase a future threat in one clean, deniable sweep, making the trap look like a masterpiece of sweet revenge. And as he watches the silent panic behind the regressor's shadowed eyes, Kyung can only smirk, asking if the proposal is too much for him, before quickly offering a polite way out to keep his innocent act intact, only for Hyunsung to take the bait and agree to the raid under the condition that they run separate parties. Which is exactly what Kyung wanted, letting him fake a sigh of relief about not wanting to trust a killer with his back, while volunteering to deliver the news to Jinho. And once the regressor tells him to gather the rest of the core squad for preparations, Kyung smoothly exits the scene, knowing his psychological setup is flawless, leaving the physical execution of his rivals entirely in the hands of a guilt-ridden demigod. But his quiet celebration is immediately cut short when he hears a bunch of loud, high-pitched giggles echoing through the camp, revealing Jinho out here playing the ultimate good guy, carrying heavy boxes and flashing a scarred, friendly smile to win over the gullible survivors, while his lackeys hand out bread like they are running a charity, successfully buying the camp's loyalty for the low price of a few carbs, which has these clueless NPCs practically begging Jinho to rest, totally blind to the fact that they are simping for a literal serial killer. And watching this fake PR campaign makes Kyung sick to his stomach, seeing the dark predatory shadow looming behind Jinho's warm eyes, leaving him shaking his head in pure disbelief at how easily these idiots are managed by a basic nice guy routine. Which gets even worse when a couple of lazy bums start whispering that Kyung is a fraud who does nothing while the new guys carry the camp, making him want to scream that he is the only reason they aren't currently being harvested. But he shakes off the irritation and heads over to the field where Hyun is practicing her magic, while Dyaku is snoring like a broken chainsaw. The second she spots her appa, her eyes light up with pure unadulterated adoration as she proudly brags about her new wind spells, completely devoted to her favorite manager, which is great for his tactical control, but he notices she is getting way bolder with her physical affection, basically forcing the entire camp to treat them like an official couple. And it doesn't help that Dyaku is still acting like a certified matchmaker, looking at them like how my ex looked at her phone when her male best friend texted her at midnight, forcing Kyung to mentally block his wingman's nonsense. So he gathers the squad in a quiet clearing to break down the upcoming dungeon raid with Jinho's group, prompting Dyaku to admit he has a bad feeling about these new guys, which Kyung validates by telling them to keep their distance, causing Hyen to eagerly vow that she will entirely ignore them, though Kyung has to gently correct her, explaining that basic politeness is fine, but she needs to treat Yusiku like a ghost. She happily accepts, totally locked in on her Appa's orders, as they head back and pass Jinho's core team on the trail, leading to a silent, chilling moment of eye contact between the two predators, both of them hiding their claws behind a mask of total indifference, until they reach Hyunsung's quarters, where Dyaku throws the door open with zero manners to announce their arrival, interrupting the regressor, who was busy looking over his personal stash. And as Dyaku starts teasing him about clutching his bag like a secretive grandmother, hiding her pension, Hyunsung just offers a quiet, knowing smile, revealing that he actually has a special delivery for the squad, causing Hyen to gasp in anticipation, as he reaches into the sack and pulls out a brilliant radiant golden glow that completely illuminates the dark room. And the moment that high-tier loot hits his eyes, Kyung's greedy heart starts pounding his mind, screaming that his investment in this golden goose is finally paying off. Hyunsung steps up with his hand practically glowing like a neon sign, acting like he's about to drop the most generous stimulus package, by laying out some shiny high-tier accessories on the table, which immediately makes Dyaku and the squad lose their minds because they've been running on budget gear. While Kyung stands there wearing his best polite customer service smile, internally thanking whatever god summoned him for giving him a cheat code regressor boss who does all the hard labor. And as the system windows pop up to show off the stats of the Iron Dwarf steel bracelet, Dyaku immediately claims it because he knows his bulky self needs all the defense he can get, happily snapping that heavy metal onto his wrist and promising to repay the favor, while Kyung looks at him and silently labels him a dumbass pig who is way too easy to please, before turning his eyes back to the real prizes left on the table, plotting exactly how to distribute the remaining gear to maximize his own safety. Because that gold magic shield ring is a top-tier defensive cheat that can deploy a barrier twice a day, making it vastly superior to some basic stat-boosting bracelet, while the silver healing ring is the perfect item to hand over to young Hyen, ensuring that his pocket healer waifu has the exact tools needed to patch him up whenever he gets himself into trouble. And the second she reaches out and claims the silver ring, Kyung snatches up his golden shield ring with a greedy blush, acting like he's doing them a favor by taking the leftover, feigning a modest polite concern about whether it's truly okay for them to take such valuable items, while his inner scammer is screaming in pure unadulterated triumph, as Hyen blushes and stammers out her thanks, only for Hyunsung to hit them with a soft sentimental smile and declare that they are officially comrades, a word that makes Kyung's hand tighten on his cloak, his mind instantly dissecting the psychological weight behind that simple label, even squeezing out a single performative tear to match the mood, though internally he's laughing at the idea of being moved by cheap sentimentality, knowing that it doesn't matter if the regressor is trying to make them feel indebted as long as they are riding his coattails to the top. Since compared to a future legendary mage and a sturdy mountain of a tank, Kyung is just a fragile question mark who has to rely entirely on his wits to survive. But because those two monsters trust him blindly, the regressor has no choice but to drag him along as a package deal, which basically guarantees our boy a cushy vice chairman position in Hyunsung's future kingdom as long as he keeps proving his administrative value. Smiling warmly as he strokes his new ring, feeling the sweet stable dopamine hit of securing his position as the brains of this operation. Until Dyaku asks when they are hitting the road, prompting Kyung to drop the warmth and warn his team that young Jinho and his crew are not allies, but dangerous variables, urging them to stay on high alert because once they descend into the dark underground, anything can happen. And to lock in their focus, he switches back to his charismatic leader persona, suggesting they stack their hands for a quick motivational huddle, counting down and throwing their hands up with a bright unified cheer that makes them look like a wholesome, happy family. Though behind his closed eyes, Kyung is chillingly anticipating the moment young Jinho gets crushed by the regressor's wrath, his face shifting into a dark, sinister shadow as he vows to set the stage for Jinho's demise, unaware that Jinho and Siku are currently in the woods plotting to use this exact dungeon raid as an opportunity to assassinate Hyunsung and claim his spot as the undisputed king of the shelter. When morning comes and Kyung approaches Jinho's waiting crew with a polite, deferential greeting, the air is already thick with hidden daggers, and Jinho smiles warmly, acting like a friendly neighbor while secretly laughing at how easily these fools are walking into his trap, while Hyunsung stands in the background silent and brooding, carrying the heavy weight of his past life's trauma. As Kyung's mind's eye continuously flashes Jinho's red alert status, screaming the words calculative murderer in his mind like a broken siren. And as the combined party finally steps into the dim stone-walled corridors of the underground dungeon, Jinho starts making casual small talk, explaining his theories on the tutorial's survival and clear conditions, trying to sound like a genius strategist to earn their trust, before casually asking Kyung what his profession was back on Earth, prompting our boy to lie and claim he was just a simple butcher, laughing it off to lower their guard, while Hyen silently walks behind him, clutching the edge of his cloak like a terrified, fragile child, which Jinho immediately notices, smiling slyly as he asks if the two of them are always together because they are secretly dating, instantly throwing Kyung into a panic, while Hyen's face flushes red, his mind screaming that this scarred bastard is acting like a meddlesome matchmaker, internally debating whether he should claim her as a sister or slowly build the bond before realizing that securing his waifu's loyalty is his highest priority. But before he can even formulate a smooth response, Hyan looks up with a flushed, intensely wide-eyed expression and aggressively claims the relationship, leaving Kaiong in a state of pure sweating panic that reminds me of when my card declined at a nice restaurant after I spent 2 hours bragging about my crypto portfolio, while Hyan happily leans into him, her mind repeating a terrifying obsessive loop of "Appa, we suit each other" over and over. Wincing in actual physical pain as she squeezes his arm with monstrous strength, silently cursing Jinho for triggering this Yandere nightmare, as Diaka points out they've arrived at a massive arched stone gate radiating an ominous purple glow, stepping into the dark cavernous depths of the dungeon. Descending the stone staircase with torches casting eerie shadows when Diaka suddenly halts and looks back with a deeply worried expression. And Kaiong's eyes widen in sudden sweating shock as a bright golden light illuminates the dark corridor, revealing a compulsory rare rank quest notification that literally traps them in a survival mission, forcing them to fight. And as the party stares at the floating golden boxes in sheer dread, a thunderous rumbling shakes the stone walls, as a colossal purple-skinned, three-headed cyclops emerges from the dark gate, roaring with pure malice, showing off rows of razor-sharp teeth and a thick lolling tongue as it looms over the terrified group, leaving Kaiong sweating profusely, staring up at the giant beast with a face of pure unadulterated terror, as his final desperate internal thought hangs in the dark void, realizing they might have just walked into their own graves. And right on cue, these gray-skinned cyclopean dumpster fires charge and screaming, which immediately forces Kaiong to play his role, shouting for everyone to move, but the dungeon system is already 3 steps ahead, slamming the massive steel gates shut with a heavy crash that traps their entire squad, leaving the useless side characters instantly shaking in their boots, while Kaiong drops a frantic motivational speech telling them to stay put because they can still win this, while secretly tapping into his cheat code, popping his mind's eye to scan these evolved demons, only to find out the system is actively roasting their intelligence and eyesight, which is hilarious. But the sheer volume of these giant bastards means his current frontline setup is looking dangerously thin, until Hyunsung locks eyes with him and drops a casual reassurance, proving why having an actual regressor in your party is the ultimate security blanket. So Kaiong wastes zero time calling out Diaku, who immediately raises his shield alongside the rest of the front line. But before any of these dumbass can even register the horde, Hyunsung moves like a cheat code, speed blitzing forward, with a chilling grin on his face, casually announcing he's going to clear the path, charging straight into the center of the storm, while Kaiong stays safely in the back, silently watching the show, deliberately keeping his own mana reserves full because he knows the real threat isn't the monsters. As Hyunsung leaps into the air, drawing his blade with terrifying speed, and instead of hitting the demons, he pivots midair and drives his sword straight at Jinho's neck, forcing Jinho to barely block the strike while trying to laugh off the fact that his supposed ally just tried to decapitate him, which is a wild move. But Hyunsung's eyes are glowing blue with pure unadulterated hatred as he tests his mortal enemy's limits, leaving Kaiong standing in the shockwave of their clashing blades, realizing this is the ultimate battle of the timelines unfolding right in front of him. And watching these two monsters trade blows makes him question if they even belong to the same species. But while the heavy hitters are busy having an anime duel, Diaku is out here putting in that overtime, swinging his shield like a madman, which actually makes Kaiong feel like a proud father, realizing his designated meat shield has officially evolved into a legitimate shield warrior. Before he can celebrate his tank's glow up, he turns his attention to the real weapon of mass destruction in their party, where this SSS tier Yandere baddie is quietly whispering a prayer that sounds more like a wedding vow than an actual magic incantation, praying to get left entirely alone with her beloved Appa, which is a level of toxic dependency that reminds me of how my ex used to check my location every 5 minutes while claiming she just wanted to make sure I was safe, before she unleashes a massive wind bomb that totally obliterates the entire left side of the room, prompting Kaiong to snap his fingers and shower her with praise, choosing to ignore the terrifying red flags in her speech because she just cleared his path, realizing she did this on purpose, strategically wiping out only the monsters on their side so the rest of the horde would swarm Jinho's faction, which is the most diabolical assist ever, prompting him to lean in close to his loyal little monster, whispering a sweet little command to make sure she entirely ignores any cries for help from the other group. And the trap springs perfectly as Siku starts screaming for backup, totally oblivious to the fact that his death warrant was signed 10 minutes ago, desperately begging for a single shield or a spell while his own mana pool runs dry, which is too bad because a grotesque multi-eyed demon immediately lunges from the shadows, slamming him into the dirt, while the three-headed monster starts tearing through their hooded companion, turning the right side of the cavern into an actual slaughterhouse. And as the screams echo off the stone walls, Kaiong and Hyan are just standing there casually smiling like they're watching a movie, though Kaiong still has to put on a show for the invisible cameras, waving his hands and shouting fake encouragement to the dying men, telling them to hang in there while holding his staff, playing the role of the stressed-out coordinator. And he even tells them to think of their families back on Earth, which is a level of psychological disrespect that should be studied in universities, prompting the dying men to scream curses at him, demanding he use his magic instead of dropping useless motivational quotes. But Kaiong just lets the shadows cover his eyes, smiling, because he knows that in every group someone has to play the villain. And today he is more than happy to be a total menace, extending his hand as a massive fireball begins to manifest, which makes the monsters pause, thinking they are about to get blasted. But instead of killing them, Kaiong deliberately aims to miss, coating the demons in a layer of intense crackling flames that actually buffs their destructive power, leaving Dyaku to think the fight is finally over only to realize the nightmare is just starting. As these newly buffed flaming monstrosities turn their eyes directly toward Jinho's struggling faction, giving birth to the Blazing Demons, a custom-made execution squad designed to wipe out his political rivals without leaving a single trace of evidence. Leaving Siku to stare into the inferno in total despair, finally realizing he was never a player in this game, just a sacrificial lamb. We kick things off with the status screen of this blazing, evolved demon, which reveals that while these three-eyed monsters look intimidating on the outside, their stamina is dropping by 1 point every single minute because they are literally on fire, leaving Kitchell's faction to lose their minds in the heat as they scream for some kind of miracle. While our boy Kyeong is just standing in the back rubbing his chin like a cartoon villain waiting for Jinho to show his real power. But Jinho is still trying to play the noble leader role, barking out orders to maintain a useless formation, which does nothing to stop Siku from trying to tuck his tail and run while Kyeong watches with a cold stare, knowing that Jinho is willing to let his own men get turned into charcoal just to keep his magical swordsman class a secret. As Kitchell gets hoisted into the air by a burning demon screaming for Jaejin to save him, while Kyeong and Hyen stand calmly in the background, internally complaining that his mana is taking too damn long to recharge, right as Dyaku panics, asking if they should jump in and help, which is when Kyeong has to hit him with the classic protective lie, telling his big shield warrior to stay back for his own safety, while his actual inner thoughts are just pure unadulterated selfishness, leaving Kitchell to get ripped to pieces by the burning monster, his screams echoing through the stone walls, as Jaejin collapses to the floor howling in grief over his friend's execution, while Jinho just stands there secretly mocking Kitchell for being too weak to survive on his own, which is the exact moment Kyeong realizes this tragedy is the perfect political setup to break their group's cohesion. So he decides to wrap up the show, sending his SSS tier waifu Hyen to step forward with a massive surge of blue mana, unleashing a heavy water strike that douses the remaining monsters, turning the threat into steam, earning her a sweet head pat from her beloved Appa, while the system officially declares the first round cleared. But the quiet doesn't last long as heavy angry footsteps start echoing down the stone corridor, and a deeply traumatized Jaejin marches right up to Kyeong, pointing a finger and screaming like a madman, accusing Kyeong of letting Kitchell die on purpose, which instantly triggers a dangerous reaction from Hyen, her eyes glowing a predatory red as her mind fills with homicidal thoughts, while Kyeong quickly puts on his best pathetic face, gaslighting Jaejin with a trembling voice, claiming he did everything he could to minimize the casualties, before his expression shifts for a split second, locking eyes with his accuser, delivering a cold, disrespectful line about how everyone else is still breathing, which is the ultimate psychological trigger, pushing Jaejin entirely past his limit, causing him to lose his mind and wind up his fist, punching Kyeong straight in the jaw, sending him flying to the cold stone floor as Dyaku and Hyen scream in horror. But while Kyeong is groaning on the ground, his inner tactical calculator is actually celebrating the hit, realizing this physical assault is the perfect opportunity to play the fragile, defenseless victim. So he starts trembling on cue right as Jaejin tries to lunge again, only to get stopped by a firm hand, as Hyunsung steps in to block the blow, while Jinho watches from the side and decides to change his plans, realizing their cover is blown, so they have to play along and focus on clearing the dungeon first, leaving Hyunsung to apologize to Kyeong, explaining that Jaejin only lost his cool because of his friend's death, which Jaejin fiercely denies, screaming that Kyeong is a manipulative fraud who set them up on purpose, prompting Kyeong to drop to his knees, sobbing hysterically to put on the performance of a lifetime, crying about his own perceived incompetence while his loyal protectors watch in distress, shaking violently as he reaches for his sword, muttering about how he should have been stronger, and pointing the blade directly at his own chest, threatening to pay for Kitchell's death with his life, which is a total act as his inner monologue is smugly praising his own top-tier theater skills, feeling a wave of satisfaction from seeing how much everyone is panicking over his safety, while Hyunsung glares at Jaejin and Siku whispers to his friend to back down before they get killed, prompting Jaejin to drop a massive truth bomb, revealing that Hyen was actually his fiancée back on Earth. But with no one believing his story, Jaejin is forced to bow his head and deliver a painful, humiliating apology, clenching his teeth in pure agony as his entire reputation crumbles, watching his entire life plan fall apart faster than my self-esteem when I get left on read for 48 hours by a girl who is bad at replying in her bio, while Kyeong flashes a brief sinister grin from the shadows, watching his rival turn away defeated, laughing hysterically in his head because nobody in this dungeon is ever going to believe a word they say, while Jinho watches Kyeong with a dark red-eyed intrigue, wondering if he should recruit this brilliant scammer instead, which Kyeong immediately notices, narrowing his eyes as he senses the shift in the air, right as Siku walks past him, whispering a mocking comment about his protective shields, trying to get under his skin, but Kyeong just dismisses the cheap taunt as Siku runs ahead, leaving our favorite scammer on the ground, his face bruised from the punch, as he spits on the floor in pure disgust, cursing the audacity of these clowns, before quickly slipping back into his fragile victim persona as Hyunsung approaches, whining about how much his face hurts, playing on the regressor's deep-seated guilt, as Hyunsung reaches out with a warm purple healing light, while Kyeong celebrates having such a useful tool. But the warm moment is instantly shattered as a sudden freezing chill runs down Kyeong's spine, and he looks up to see Hyen standing behind them, surrounded by a massive, terrifying aura of extreme fury, her eyes glowing red as Kyoung realizes his Yandere waifu has forbidden anyone, even another man, from touching his body, leaving him in sheer dread as she reaches down to pocket the bloody tooth he lost hoarding it as a creepy souvenir. Coughing up dark blood like a broken faucet, Lee Kyoung puts on a pathetic struggling performance, which immediately sends Young Hyan into a state of panic, her eyes filling with tears as she starts sobbing, prompting her to start muttering some dark homicidal vows about taking revenge on the idiot who dared to touch her beloved Appa. While Kyoung watches her eyes bleed into that terrifying predatory red, realizing he needs to calm his pocket nuke down before she ruins his staged victimhood. So he starts calculating his next move, knowing he needs a quick trigger to turn Young Jinho's faction into undeniable villains. Remembering how this whole mess started back at the shelter when she was crying over him, leaving him looking incredibly uncomfortable, and how ridiculously easy it was to bait the insecure losers into camp, especially with his specialty of provoking fragile egos. Especially Yusikwu, who looks like he's about to have a physical stroke from pure envy. Which is why Kyoung plays up his weakness, leaning heavily against Hyan's shoulder to make it look like he's barely holding on, and walking away with a smug, mocking smirk, knowing Sikwu is watching them like a pathetic, rejected puppy, till he deliberately lets his foot stumble on a loose stone to create a flawless romantic opening, allowing Hyan to instinctively catch him, wrapping her arms around him as the atmosphere suddenly shifts into a highly stylized, manufactured romantic scene that Kyoung didn't even plan but is fully prepared to exploit, as he keeps his analytical eye wide open, tracking Sikwu's psychological collapse from the shadows, reveling in the fact that the man is shaking with a level of jealousy that could kill a lesser being. Calling how Sikwu tried to act like a white knight back at the shelter, offering his pathetic help, only for Hyan to hit him with the most cold-blooded, soul-crushing rejection, telling him to mind his own business, leaving him entirely humiliated as she walked away without a second glance, which rotted Sikwu's fragile ego so badly his hands are still trembling, looking at his palms like how I looked at my bank account after buying a round of drinks for people who left the party 10 minutes later, convinced that Kyoung is just a classless piece of trash who needs to be put in his place. Which brings us back to the present, where the party is facing a horde of cyclopean monsters in a tight stone corridor, prompting Park Deoku to raise his massive shield while Kyoung tells Hyan to go on ahead, reassuring her that he'll catch up, calculating the exact 20-meter distance he needs to isolate himself, confident that he can easily block the slow, predictable monsters on his own, and quietly laughing to himself because he still has the magic shield ring as his safety net, until quiet footsteps begin to echo on the cold stone floor, revealing Sikwu stepping out of the darkness with a desperate, manic grin, prompting Kyoung to drop a hand on his shoulder, whispering his name like a smug director, and asking if he's jealous with a smile so disrespectful it should be a federal crime, which pushes Sikwu past his breaking point, screaming in pure madness as he drives a glowing red blade straight through Kyoung's chest, unleashing a scream of genuine, unadulterated agony that echoes through the entire cavern. Though Kyoung forces himself to endure the physical torture, focusing entirely on turning Sikwu into a monster, shouting at the top of his lungs to make sure the entire party hears the betrayal, as he lies in his own blood waiting for the pieces of his masterpiece to fall into place, while Hyan and Deoku freeze in the middle of their fight, hearing his scream. And Jinho's archer begins to shake in terror, realizing something has gone horribly wrong, as Sikwu stands over Kyoung's body, manic and screaming that he finally killed him, leaving young Jinho in a state of pale-faced horror, as he realizes his entire infiltration plan has been ruined by a brainless landmine in his own group, prompting Jinho to draw his sword ready to eliminate Sikwu to save his own skin, which is the exact moment Kyoung was waiting for, needing Jinho to clash with the regressor, locking eyes with Kim Hyunsung and silently commanding him to strike, which sends the regressor charging forward to lock Jinho in a high-speed duel, while Deoku and Hyan come sprinting back through the stone hall, leaving Kyoung gasping for air on the floor, reaching for his healing items, only for a dark hooded figure to step out of the shadows, revealing the furious, tear-stained face of Jaejun, who is trembling with a murderous light, screaming that Kyoung killed Kichul and deserves to die, before brutally driving a second weapon straight into Kyoung's side, leaving him in paralyzed shock. Just as Hyan rounds the corner, her world suddenly shifting into a cold, distorted red, as she stares down at his broken, bleeding body in pure, unadulterated horror, unleashing a blood-curdling scream that echoes through the very depths of the dungeon. And Kyoung lets out a scream so raw you'd think he just watched his entire crypto portfolio turn into dust, instantly triggering a wave of panic as Deoku raises his shield with pure, unadulterated rage, while Hyunsung's face drops, because their tactical vanguard just got turned into a human pincushion by these delusional, low-tier local clowns, which forces Hyunsung to immediately pivot his blade, clashing against the attackers with enough kinetic force to shake the entire room, as he desperately tries to clear a path back to the rear guard before the situation becomes entirely unsalvageable. While young Jinho stands in the shadows, his red eyes narrowing in sudden sharp irritation as he realizes his infiltration plan is falling apart, which is why Hyunsung screams across the chaotic chamber, ordering Deoku to secure the VIPs while he handles the heavy lifting. And Deoku nods, bracing his massive frame, while the cowards who orchestrated this mess scramble to find an exit. But Kim Jaejun has no intention of leaving quietly, his mind warped by a toxic mix of jealousy and vengeance. Even as Deoku frantically shakes Kyoung's limp body, entirely unaware that our favorite scammer is still breathing, cursed with too much spite to die. Though Hyan is too busy having a hysterical psychological meltdown to remember she has a cheap tier medical item in her inventory. until Diaku's shouting finally snaps her back to reality, forcing her to focus her monstrous mana into the silver band, unleashing a brilliant cascade of restorative energy that begins to knit his shredded organs back together in real time. Which actually works so well it even puts his knocked-out tooth back in his mouth like some high-end celestial dental plan. Before he can even celebrate his temporary survival, another random lackey lunges from the dark with a raised blade, triggering a flash of genuine shock on Jinho's face as his own men continue to act out of character, ignoring the chain of command. While Kaiyang just lies there with a smug, unbothered smile, realizing this is the perfect moment to test his new defensive gear, activating his golden barrier ring to deploy a solid hexagonal dome that deflects the lethal blow like it's nothing, leaving Diaku staring in awe while Kaiyang quietly notices the empty cold space right beside him. As Diaku drops his head in deep, tearful shame, blaming his own heavy frame for being too slow to protect his mentor, whining about his perceived usefulness like a massive golden retriever that accidentally knocked over an expensive vase, which prompts Kaiyang to offer a gentle, highly performative head pat to keep his primary meat shield emotionally stable, telling him to dry his eyes because a guy with a build like a brick wall crying in a dark dungeon is a terrible look. And Diaku is looking at Kaiyang like how my ex looked at me when my debit card declined at a nice restaurant right after I promised her the world. But Kaiyang is secretly thrilled with how this turned out, while deeper in the stone corridors Jaejun is running for his life, cursing Jinho's lack of loyalty while plotting to return later and tear our main character to pieces, only for a sudden lethal flash of condensed wind magic to slice through the heavy silence of the corridor, severing his leg so cleanly he doesn't even register the physical detachment until he hits the cold stone floor. As Hyen steps out of the darkness, her red eyes glowing with the terrifying intensity of an SSS rank Yandra, clamping her hand over his jaw with monstrous strength to force his mouth open for a very personal delivery, detonating a pressurized air bomb directly inside his chest cavity within a soundproof barrier to keep his screams private. And she casually asks if it hurts, rationalizing this horrific execution as simple righteous payback for her beloved Appa, pouting about getting blood on her face because she knows Kaiyang prefers his waifus clean and presentable, treating this brutal murder like a minor domestic chore she needs to wrap up before heading home. While Jaejun's fading consciousness clings to a desperate delusional plan of future dominance and mass murder that instantly evaporates into nothingness as his body goes entirely cold under her vacant, unbothered gaze. While back in the main corridor, Siku is pinned to the floor by a heavy spear, still trying to talk tough, completely unaware that the main character is currently looking down at him like a pathetic washed-up clown, forcing his chin up to make him realize that his precious allies abandoned him the second the plan went south, laughing in his face as his pathetic, insecure mind struggles to process the sheer scale of his tactical failure, revealing with absolute disrespect that his entire presence in this dungeon was just a tool to make Hyen cling closer, which sends Siku into a screaming, veins-popping rage as his fragile ego is completely dismantled. But Kaiyang just stands there unbothered, calmly explaining that the only logical way to cool his temper is to end his life, prompting Diaku to look away in quiet horror as he realizes his mentor is about to cross a very dark line, while Siku thrashes and begs for his life, staring up at the cold, unyielding figure of his executioner, who believes that getting his hands dirty is the only way to truly adapt to this Darwinian nightmare, dismissing his desperate pleas with a calm, chilling smile that shows he has completely left his humanity behind. And as the light in the corridor dims into a heavy, suffocating purple hue, Kaiyang's internal monologue remains entirely detached, focusing solely on the immediate tactical necessity, tightening his grip on the weapon as he prepares to deliver the final decisive strike, whispering a quiet apology not out of genuine remorse, but as a cold mechanical sign-off to a chore, as his mind briefly drifts to the spectral faces of the people he has indirectly discarded to secure his own survival, forcing himself to stay calm by rationalizing that in this world empathy is a luxury he simply cannot afford, and that every single sacrifice was a necessary step on his climb to the top of this food chain, sending one more soul into the quiet void as the weapon finally descends with a heavy, muffled thud, before turning back to Diaku with a perfectly calm expression advising him to get used to the reality of their world, asking a casual dark question about his faith as they stand over the silent remains of their latest political rival, only to laugh it off, admitting he doesn't believe in a higher power because this world has already proven itself to be godless, which is instantly confirmed when the system chimes in to reward his direct murder with a brand new class selection, leaving us with a chilling final command to his loyal shield to survive this nightmare at all costs. The dust is barely settling in this dim-lit stone corridor, but instead of catching his breath, Kaiyang is standing there with Hyunsung, staring at the glowing class selection card in his hand, while the regressor casually tells him to just pick whatever sounds the coolest, though Kaiyang is just sighing, because every single option on this screen is a high-tier utility cheat, and he knows he has to play his cards right to stay alive. But before he can even map out his next strategic evolution, the rapid patter of footsteps echoes through the dark stone hallway, and Young Hyen comes flying out of the shadows, throwing her arms around his neck with enough force to knock the wind out of him, while he immediately switches back to his caring protective mentor mask, asking if she's hurt. She's sobbing, asking what they're going to do about you, Siku, and Kaiyang just looks her dead in the eyes and says he's dead, which makes her face light up with this terrifying pure relief before she tries to act normal. She clings even tighter, demanding to know where he went and why he took so long, and Kaiyang realizes he has to keep this ticking time bomb placated before she starts questioning his whereabouts. So he casually asks if she went to help Hyunsung instead, which short-circuits her brain, making her panic, and swear she has zero interest in the regressor. She starts biting her lip, her eyes glowing with this dark, unstable intensity, as she admits she got so angry at her Earth fiancé Jaejin for hurting her precious Appa that she ended up executing him without even realizing it. She's weeping, totally consumed by this obsessive guilt, while Deaku stands there patting her shoulder like a clueless giant, telling her everything is fine and begging Kyung to come over and help. Kyung slowly walks forward, his face softening into the ultimate gentle savior facade, while his inner monologue is doing pure clinical calculations. He reaches out, gently patting her head and pulling her into a warm embrace, whispering that it's okay, because he knows she only did it to protect him. While internally he's fully aware he is hugging a literal nuclear warhead with a cute face, knowing he has to keep stroking her hair so she doesn't decide to delete the rest of the dungeon. She's sniffling against his cloak, completely placated by the physical affection, so Kyung looks over his shoulder to hand off the emotional babysitting duties to Deaku. But this big dummy just folds his arms and lets out the most smug, self-satisfied chuckle, looking like my dad when he successfully forced me to sit at the dinner table with my ex-girlfriend right after she cheated on me with my cousin. Kyung is standing there in silent white-knuckled fury, realizing this idiot genuinely thinks he's the matchmaker of the century and has just locked him into an inescapable Yandere contract. The comedy show gets cut short when heavy blood-soaked footsteps echo from the purple shadows of the hallway, revealing Hyunsung standing there covered head to toe in fresh blood, but wearing this incredibly peaceful, gentle smile that makes Kyung realize the regressor just did some horrific god-level cleaning. Hyunsung's smile fades into a somber, serious look as he looks down at his blood-splattered cloak and flatly announces that he took care of the rest of Jinho's faction, leaving no survivors in the dark. Kyung looks back at the dark corridor, visualizing Jinho's broken sword and severed hand lying in a pool of blood, entirely unbothered by the slaughter, because he knows those human-hunting parasites got exactly what they deserved. He stands there in the purple gloom, fully accepting the grim reality of this culling, while Hyunsung tries to process the weight of the violence. Hyunsung looks down, muttering that they did the right thing because they will inevitably meet more cruel, predatory people on the continent. And Kyung immediately plays along, dropping his warmest, most relieved smile to thank him for being their shield. He waves off his own injuries, pointing out that he's good as new, but reminding Hyunsung that he would be dead if not for the golden protective ring he gifted him. He looks up with this sparkling, grateful expression, making the battle-hardened regressor look slightly flustered by the sheer intensity of the praise. With the threat permanently neutralized, the group finally moves deeper into the dungeon to find a safe stone chamber to set up camp. Walking side by side like a real family, while Deaku smugly nudges Hyunsung, asking him why his face is turning so red under the firelight. Hyunsung just looks away, muttering some weak excuse, while Kyung smiles to himself, realizing he is officially riding the most secure, overpowered survival bus in this entire tutorial. He lets out a quiet smirk, his eyes reflecting the warm, purple ambient glow of the corridor, silently labeling these monstrously talented fighters as his most precious high-value assets. They build a small campfire in a quiet stone room, the orange flames crackling warmly against the cold walls, while Kyung decides it's time to make his move. Approaching Hyunsung with a bundle of firewood to casually drop the news that he's finally unlocked his next class evolution. Hyunsung looks up, genuinely impressed by the rapid growth, and asks him what options the system has laid out for him. Kyung summons his golden interface, revealing 5 distinct rare-grade classes: Summoner, Magic Lancer, Black Magician, Alchemist, and Flame Magician. Takes a bite of bread, laughing quietly because he was secretly terrified the system would give him some garbage scammer class, but instead he got a premium lineup. He starts reading the class details aloud, starting with the Summoner, which offers a balanced stat boost of stamina, intelligence, and magic power, making it highly attractive to Kyung, because having minions fight for him is the ultimate lazy man's dream. Next is the Magic Lancer, which he immediately skips, because any class that requires him to physically move his body or swing a spear is a direct threat to his survival. Then he looks at the Black Magician, which offers a massive magic power boost, but comes with the sketchy warning of borrowing power from the devil. Kyung's mind immediately flashes back to a grim scenario of hooded cultists being hunted down by fanatical religious groups with pitchforks, making him realize dark magic is a fast track to getting executed. He knows his low magic power means he needs to rely heavily on his high intelligence stat, making the Alchemist class look incredibly lucrative. So he explains the Flame Magician's high mana cost to Hyunsung, asking for his veteran guidance on what to choose. Hyunsung doesn't hold back, pointing out that Kyung's physical stats are trash and that his spear-wielding skills are practically non-existent. Kyung is internally crying over the blunt violation of his combat skills, but he knows the regressor is speaking the raw truth. Hyunsung analyzes the board, ruling out the mana-hungry fire magic and the highly controversial black magic, concluding that his only viable paths are Summoner or Alchemist, which perfectly aligns with Kyung's own calculations. Hyunsung explains that while Summoners require a constant drain of mana to maintain their beasts, Alchemists operate on a completely different level, relying on homunculi, which are artificial organisms that only require a one-time mana catalyst to activate. Kyung's eyes widen as he stares at the glowing green interface, realizing the unprecedented utility of this rare class. Knowing that while priests are great for basic healing, high-quality recovery potions made by alchemists will be the ultimate premium currency once they reach the continent. He's already plotting to start a massive blue potion monopoly, but he still lingers on the easy convenience of the Summoner class, when Deaku suddenly interrupts, loudly demanding that his Hyungnim should become a dark, edgy black magician. Hyeon is blushing totally on board with the aesthetic of her oppa being a Dark Lord, but Hyeonsung's eyes instantly flare with a dangerous glowing blue light. As a massive spectral tiger and dragon manifest behind them, locking them in a silent high-stakes clash of wills over Kyeong's ultimate destiny. Deaku is out here doing full-on theatrical poses, trying to sell this edgy dark mage aesthetic to anyone who will listen. Which immediately has Kyeong questioning this man's cognitive function, knowing that dark magicians on the continent get hunted down like wild dogs by religious zealots. But Deaku is already lost in his own delusional fanboy fantasy, imagining Hyunsung draped in dark robes and swirling purple magic like some high-tier anime villain, prompting Kyeong to shut down the entire operation with a look of pure unadulterated disgust, flatly telling the big man that the dark mage build is a hard pass. Which is when Hyunsung steps in to back him up, dropping a heavy reality check that alchemist is the only logical choice for the party's long-term utility. And the entire campfire devolves into a loud-ass bickering match between the tank and the regressor, leaving Kyeong deeply regretting his life choices. As the argument escalates into a full-on aura clash, with veins popping and fire roaring, looking like two sweaty gamers fighting over a patch note update. Until they both suddenly pivot and corner Young-Hyun screaming for a tiebreaker vote, and leaving her looking like a deer caught in high beams. Which has the poor girl sweating bullets caught in the crossfire of these two loud-ass men demanding she pick a side, causing her brain to instantly fracture into two wild, highly degenerate fantasies, starting with an intellectual scientist version of her appa in a lab coat, and immediately transitioning into a dangerously handsome hooded Dark Lord version of Kyeong, which has her blushing and buffering harder than my card declining at Denny's after promising my ex the world. While Kyeong just stares at her glitched-out face, trying to calculate the actual risk-to-reward ratio of running a high-tier dark magic build. Until Hyunsung decides to end the debate by reaching into his inventory, looking like he's about to pull out a massive cheat code, and pulls out a heavy glowing orange grimoire that completely blinds the entire party with its high-grade aura, triggering a system window that reveals Ramus Tucker's introduction to alchemy, a hero-grade cheat code that boosts both intelligence and magic power. As Hyunsung holds it out with this incredibly smug, gentle smile, basically asking Kyeong if he wants to get boosted for free, which has Kyeong's jaw hitting the floor, while Deaku points an accusing finger and screams that this is cheap-ass bribery, prompting Hyunsung to lie through his teeth, claiming he coincidentally found this hero-grade book in a random treasure chest, leaving Kyeong internally giggling because he knows this coincidence is a massive cap, but he's not about to complain about free high-tier loot. Realizing that Hyunsung's regressor inventory is basically a walking cheat code store that keeps spitting out perfect items at perfect times, and mentally visualizing the regressor as a cosmic vending machine floating in space loaded with rare gear waiting to be farmed. While Hyunsung literally clenches his fist and begs him to choose the alchemist class, contrasting Deaku's desperate pleas for the edgy build. Till Hyun softly steps in, telling her appa to just choose whatever makes him happy, like a supportive waifu. Which makes Kyeong close his eyes and do the quick math, realizing that sticking with the regressor's cheat codes is his only path to survival. So he puts on his best fake humble face and locks in the alchemist class, while Deaku comically crashes out in the background, tapping the golden confirmation screen to finalize the transaction before anyone can change their mind. As a brilliant burst of golden light explodes, officially updating his status screen and unlocking basic alchemy knowledge. Though the system immediately drops a highly passive-aggressive rating, basically calling him a scrub who got carried by high-tier items. Which doesn't even matter because Hyunsung is staring at him with this deeply satisfied sparkling gaze, looking like a proud gamer who just saved his favorite character from a bad ending, prompting Kyeong to feed his investor's ego, asking if he looks useful now, while internally celebrating his transition to a high-value asset. Mentally dancing on a pile of money as he imagines himself as a booming tech stock that's about to make his investor filthy rich. As Hyunsung officially hands over the book while Deaku accepts defeat and Hyun claps like a proud girlfriend, allowing Kyeong to take the tome with both hands, playing the grateful humble partner to lock in Hyunsung's loyalty, laughing off the tension while his brain is already calculating the massive financial return on this investment, with his eyes turning into actual dollar signs as he tells his investor to keep the funds flowing. As the ancient pages of the grimoire show complex alchemical formulas hinting at the high-tier crafting mechanics he's about to unlock. And later that night, Kyeong is already grinding by the campfire trying to study, while Deaku snores like a broken chainsaw, realizing that alchemy is a massive money sink that requires expensive specialized equipment and rare catalysts to even function. When Hyunsung quietly approaches, asking why his favorite strategist is still awake, prompting Kyeong to play the hardworking partner, showing his investor that he's already studying the new class mechanics. But Hyunsung is looking at him with this deeply affectionate gaze that makes Kyeong low-key nervous he's about to get overworked, as they sit by the dying embers discussing how the tutorial dungeon is finally reaching its final stage, with Hyunsung grabbing his hand, locking in a silent pact of trust as they prepare to exit the tutorial. And the scene fades to them sleeping with a bright magical light glowing at the end of the corridor, signaling the exit to the continent, which cuts to a clean blue-lit office where a mysterious silver-haired figure is looking over the tutorial survivor reports, tracking Kyeong and Hyunsung's progress like a scout looking at high-value draft picks, smiling as they realize they've finally found the perfect replacements to fill a vacant high-tier slot in their guild, sitting authoritatively at the desk looking ready to recruit our main characters into the big leagues. The massive emblem of the Piran Guild appears, signaling that the tutorial is over and the real game is about to begin. The group is walking down a purple-hued dungeon corridor, trying to ease the heavy tension with some of the worst puns known to mankind, as Diaku yells out some nonsense about wanting water, leaving Diaku scratching his head and looking totally stumped by the riddle until Kyong drops the punchline with a deadpan face, telling him the answer is being blunt, which sends Diaku into hysterics, thumping Kyong's shoulder, while Kyong internally wonders who taught Hyunsung these trash jokes, before quietly sighing that the joke was totally lame and noting that Young Hyun is actually way funnier as they keep walking down the corridor, feeling a temporary wave of relief that stands in sharp contrast to how they first started remembering the constant fear and blood in this dark, miserable dungeon. But now Kyong looks at the bond he built with the regressor, feeling secure in this partnership as he turns around to face his pocket Yandra, watching Young Hyun stare back at him with this soft, blushing expression that makes him realize how good it is to be carried by a regressor. So he reaches out and pats her on the head, making her melt on the spot, right before a sudden sound makes them freeze, prompting Kim Hyunsung to stop dead in his tracks with a surprised look on his face, because right in front of them is the massive ornate stone gate that leads directly out of this tutorial hellhole. And seeing Hyunsung smile so gently at the sight makes Kyong call him a rascal under his breath, before Diaku nods in agreement and shouts for everyone to move, charging forward like a bull, running straight toward the threshold of the unknown, while Kyong's eyes widen in anticipation, passing through the arched doorway and stepping into a massive stone-paved chamber, where they look around at the unfamiliar pillars, totally confused about where they actually are, only for Kyong to look down at the massive glowing magic circle etched into the floor, realizing they aren't outside yet, which instantly triggers a system notification announcing a rare-grade compulsory quest to conquer the dungeon, making Diaku point toward a heavy stone door on the far side of the room, and immediately run over to push it with all his might, only for Kyong to warn him to back away before he triggers a trap, analyzing the room and realizing the magic circle is the key to solving this puzzle, when Hyunsung casually walks past him toward the center of the platform, and raises his hand to inject a burst of blue mana directly into the stone, activating the intricate circle with bright blue light, making Kyong ask if that was really all they had to do, which immediately completes the quest, making Diaku cheer, while Kyong smiles in relief, watching Hyunsung look down with a quiet, melancholic expression, realizing that while the tutorial is finally over, the real survival game is just beginning. The swarm of glowing blue butterflies fills the chamber, making Hyun smile in wonder, standing together in the beautiful light at the base of the grand stone staircase, as the massive doors ahead of them slowly grind open, releasing a blinding white light, forcing Kyong to shield his eyes as a calm, professional voice welcomes them to the outside world, revealing a blonde woman in a pristine white uniform who introduces herself as the administrator, walking down the stairs with a massive guild flag bearing a winged shield, introducing herself as Lee Sang-hee, the vice guild master of the Blue Guild, making Kyong immediately suspicious of why she is acting so friendly toward them. She explains that her guild is under the name of the goddess Vinigor, and that they were also summoned here but managed to reach the exit earlier than everyone else, explaining that their duty is to guide survivors and rescue those still trapped inside, cutting to a brief view of the camp where the remaining survivors are waiting, including Lee Jae-hai, who looks somber and quiet in her dark cloak, while Sang-hee promises to teach them basic living skills, prompting Kyong to ask if the exit door stays open, only for Sang-hee to explain it only stays open for 3 days, demanding they hand over their weapons first, telling her subordinate to search for survivors while she leads Kyong's party to their base, which prompts Kyong to quietly activate his mind's eye, pulling up her detailed status screen, revealing her level, her Sacred Knight class, and her impressive heroic grade stats, making Kyong realize she could easily slaughter them all, wondering why she is acting so humble, noticing her idealistic mediator trait and realizing she only cares about them because they conquered the dungeon, walking past the armored guards as they ascend the stone steps, thinking about how the shelter survivors will get rescued, soon realizing he didn't say goodbye to Jae-hai, but dismissing it as none of his business as he steps into the blinding light, feeling a sudden gust of wind blow past his face, and looking up to see a massive white griffin soaring over the city streets, realizing that they have finally survived this nightmare, staring at the breathtaking sunset over Lindell City, as Sang-hee jokes about grilling the griffin for dinner, offering to buy them food, which makes Diaku immediately run over to a grilled squid stall, while Kyong walks through the crowded market only to stop dead in his tracks, noticing Hyunsung standing completely still with a hollow, troubled expression, making Kyong panic internally about what the regressor is planning, calling out his name to get his attention, forcing a warm, loyal smile to secure his position as the perfect partner, as Kyong panics, shouting at Hyunsung not to cut him off, looking like me when my card declined at Denny's right after I told my date I'd buy her the world, which makes Hyunsung look back with a soft, surprised expression, as Kyong promises to be good to him, making Hyunsung smile gently, confirming their partnership under the golden sunset of their new home. And the rhythmic clatter of these carriage wheels on the stone path marks the exact moment our boys finally step into civilization, rolling through a bustling fantasy metropolis that looks like a high-budget medieval simulator, where the food is actually hot and the seats are soft, letting Lee Kyong lean back with the smug satisfaction of a man who just survived a death game. And while he's basking in this sudden luxury, Lee Sang-hee breaks the silence by pointing out how they cleared the dungeon at a speed that shouldn't even be possible, explaining that a 3-month clear is a world record since normal squads take half a year, which immediately prompts Park Dyaku to ask about other dungeons. Allowing Kyung to play the role of the knowledgeable guide, knowing this world is divided into multiple empires and tutorials. As he looks out the window at the locals in their robes, realizing they've dropped straight into a living, breathing feudal society. Which is when Lee Sang-hee leans in, unable to hide her curiosity about how a tiny 4-person party managed to conquer the trial so quickly, prompting Kyung to feed her a perfectly crafted vague response about team synergy and everyone playing their roles before pivoting to his real agenda. By clenching his hands and casually requesting a full rescue mission for the 30 survivors left back at the first-level shelter, explaining that they built a fortress wall and left them with plenty of food, making it look like a pure act of benevolence. While secretly knowing this is the ultimate public relations move to make their squad look like saints to the big guilds. Realizing Kim Hyun-sung is a tactical mastermind for setting up this charity case to skyrocket their market value. And down in the dark, the Blue Guild is already doing the heavy lifting, rounding up the hysterical survivors who still can't accept their reality. Contrasting those crying losers with our main trio who are stepping out as the elite conquerors of the era. The infamous super rookies, whose names are already causing a massive wave of tension across the continent's power players. Especially with Hyun-sung out here wearing sunglasses like a celebrity, casually humble bragging about the rescue to pump up their stock. Which makes Kyung realize that riding with a regressor is basically like having a cheat code for life. Until they pull up to the Blue Guild's local estate, and Kyung's jaw hits the floor at the sheer scale of the property. Realizing this massive castle-like mansion isn't even their main headquarters, proving they are viewed as golden geese. Which means Kyung can take his sweet time analyzing Hyun-sung's ultimate goal while enjoying the red carpet treatment. Which turns into a literal circus the second they step through the golden gates and get blasted with confetti and cheering. Leaving our battle-hardened squad standing there looking completely bewildered by the sudden corporate cringe. As Lee Sang-hee tries to smooth things over, welcoming them to the banquet hall to ease their exhaustion. Though Kyung's analytical brain immediately short-circuits when she mentions hiring part-timers just to throw this welcome party, making him look up at the stunning golden ceiling and wonder why a vice guild master is personally acting like a low-level event planner. Suspicious that this whole grand display is a bit too desperate, like a startup trying way too hard to look funded. Especially when he spots the older guild officials whispering and laughing in the corner like corrupt corporate executives, prompting a quiet scoff of disgust from Kyung as he prepares to dissect whatever scam they're pulling. Right as a massive, magically glowing roast beast is wheeled out to distract them with pure indulgence. While Kyung takes a bite of the meat to keep up appearances, his mind is already running the numbers. Watching Dyaku happily stuff his face at a table that looks like it belongs to royalty. But the sheer excess only makes Kyung more suspicious, sensing a deep rot beneath the gilded surface. Which is confirmed the second he picks up a golden spoon and realizes it feels way too light to be real. Realizing they're using cheap gold-plated cutlery right as Hyun-sung casually breaks the ice by revealing his class as a swordsman. Followed by Dyaku proudly claiming shield warrior and Young-hyun timidly introducing herself as a magician, leaving Kyung to confidently drop his alchemist title. Expecting them to gasp at his double class change, only for Lee Sang-hee's face to visibly fall into deep disappointment. As she laments that he already wasted his potential on a utility class, looking at him with the exact same look of profound disappointment my ex gave me when I told her my Minecraft house was my greatest achievement. Making Kyung glare sideways at a smiling Hyun-sung, wondering if this jerk literally bought him that alchemy book just to turn him into a potion slave. But instead of folding, Kyung's predatory instincts kick in, resolving to make this alchemist class so broken they'll have to beg for his favor. While Dyaku remains blissfully ignorant, loudly praising the food and breaking the heavy tension in the room, which Kyung gladly uses as a springboard to cut through the fake hospitality and address the elephant in the room, asking point blank if this lavish treatment is because the guild is desperately bleeding out and needs their strength. Prompting a sharp nod from Lee Sang-hee, who praises his intuition before getting straight to the point, officially offering to recruit their entire squad with contract terms to secure their future, which makes Kyung lean back with a smug grin, ready to milk this desperate guild for every single penny they have. But as she begins her grand explanation of the continent's power structure, Kyung notices a terrifying detail. Seeing Hyun-sung nodding along with the eager submission of a dog waiting for a treat, making Kyung panic. Wondering why a literal regressor is falling for this fake gold circus and agreeing to join a dying guild. As Hyun-sung continues nodding like a bobblehead, completely ignoring the massive red flags. Leaving Kyung to scream internally, wishing his leader would play some basic mind games instead of instantly folding. Pinching the bridge of his nose in absolute frustration at this tactical disaster. Trying to decipher what secret knowledge the regressor is hiding behind those empty eyes. Wondering if Hyun-sung was just a massive pushover in his past life who got exploited by everyone. Feeling a sudden wave of pity for this traumatized hero who built a whole shelter just out of pure guilt. Until Lee Sang-hee stabs a piece of meat and asks who Kyung really is to him. Prompting Kyung to flash a sharp predatory smile as he stakes his claim on the regressor. Looking at the heavy tragic titles floating over Hyun-sung's soul and vowing to protect this broken asset. Biting into his meat with a grin that says he is officially running the show from the shadows. Kyung drops the ultimate reassuring face, smirking as he promises Hyun-sung that he has his back. Casually holding his fork over a plate of luxury food, because before we talk numbers we need a quick lesson on how this world actually runs. Starting with the big 3 superpowers, the Holy Empire of Benegor, the Republic, and the Kingdom Alliance, who are all locked in a tense geopolitical stalemate, while trying to coexist with the native elves, dragons, and lizardmen, making this entire continent a massive, complicated political sandbox, where humans from Earth are basically the new kids on the block, trying not to get wiped out. Which is why guilds like Blue operate with massive autonomy, though the catch is they have to act as national shields whenever a war breaks out. Meaning the Empire keeps these massive guilds in check with some heavy top-tier deterrence weapons to prevent any sudden coups. And to keep the roster fresh, the tutorial dungeon resets once a year, serving as a massive talent draft, where different guilds take turns managing the meat grinder just to get first dibs on the survivors, which is the ultimate cheat code for recruiting high-tier talent before anyone else can even make an offer. And since the Blue Guild ran this year's tutorial saying he is trying to play it cool, though Kaiyang is just playing dumb to see how far she'll fold, as she basically admits they are corporate recruiters trying to pitch their company and negotiate a starting salary, awkwardly laughing about how this entire luxury banquet is basically a glorified bribe to get them to sign on the dotted line, which immediately flags her as way too honest for her own good, making Kaiyang suspect she's just a puppet used to shield whatever dark secrets the guild is hiding. Because in a world of cutthroat players, someone this pure is either a trap or a massive liability. So Kaiyang decides to test her, asking what kind of standing the Blue Guild actually holds in the Empire. And she visibly hesitates, sweating bullets before admitting they were once one of the top representative guilds, which is the ultimate corporate way of saying they are currently sliding down the road of ruin due to things beyond their control. Though she desperately clenches her fist, promising they won't offer a single penny less than the other top-tier organizations, confirming Kaiyang's theory that this is a sinking ship trying to use super rookies as a cheap life preserver, which explains why they went totally over budget on this banquet just to make themselves look stable. But Kaiyang is a cold-blooded pragmatist who doesn't do charity cases, internally screaming that he isn't about to sign up for an arduous journey just because they look pitiful. So he leans in to tell Hyunsung they should bounce and sign with a top-tier guild, only for the regressor to throw a massive wrench in the plan by casually telling Sang-hee that the terms sound fine, leaving Kaiyang totally dumbfounded by this massive lack of business tact, wondering why a legendary regressor would willingly jump back into a failing organization unless there is a massive catch, or if the guy is actually 3 moves ahead and planning to exploit them for his own gain. Which is when the puzzle pieces finally click and Kaiyang realizes Hyunsung wasn't some low-level member in his past life. It was actually the heavy-hitting leader holding the ultimate authority, the actual guildmaster of the Blue Guild, meaning his entire motivation is to rewrite the tragic history of his former home, leaving Kaiyang sweating as he realizes he is dealing with a massive political heavy hitter, which makes perfect sense considering Hyunsung is a legendary player with stats that defy the system's estimation. So his kind attitude towards Sang-hee isn't weakness, but deep lingering loyalty to the people he failed to save. And as the dinner wraps up, Sang-hee politely offers to guide them to their guest rooms, while Hyun is out here blushing and talking about making meatballs looking like a top-tier waifu who is totally oblivious to the political chess game, as Hyunsung keeps his cards close to his chest, making Kaiyang smirk at what a lovely calculating partner he has secured, fully prepared to ride his coattails to the absolute top of the food chain. As they arrive at the massive guest quarters, which are guarded by the guild's massive white serpent, a towering beast that serves as the ultimate flex of their past glory, and Sang-hee pulls out the keys ready to lock in her prized recruits, handing them over with a polite smile, hoping they have a peaceful night, which Kaiyang accepts with a flawless polite bow, playing the perfect model rookie, before turning to the group to suggest they head to their individual rooms to unwind, only for Deoku to totally ruin the cool atmosphere by casually picking his nose, getting immediate side eyes from everyone, while Hyunsung just stares with a blank heavy expression, clearly wanting to ask Kaiyang what he really thinks, prompting Kaiyang to invite him inside to talk, knowing the regressor is dying for his approval. And as the door creaks open to reveal a massive luxury bedroom, Deoku charges in like a kid at a playground, losing his mind over having a real bed and blanket, while Hyun just blushes in the corner, allowing Kaiyang to prepare his ultimate psychological layout, gesturing for Hyunsung to sit down while noting how incredibly tense the legendary warrior is, which is the ultimate power trip, seeing a high-tier regressor look stiffer than I did when my ex's dad asked me what my 5-year career plan was while I was actively failing college algebra, as Kaiyang plays it cool, talking about how much he loves this VIP treatment, while Deoku complains about contracts making his head hurt, allowing Kaiyang to lay down the basic facts, explaining that they hold all the leverage, and that while other guilds will definitely throw massive offers at them, the Blue Guild might actually be their best bet, prompting Hyunsung to quickly agree, desperately hoping Kaiyang won't back out, while Hyun immediately chimes in, declaring she'll go wherever her beloved Appa goes, leaving Kaiyang to smirk, inwardly calculating the massive profits he's about to extract from this deal, as Hyunsung looks up with a wave of pure relief, trying to play it cool by saying they should keep their options open since they have nothing to lose, while Kaiyang agrees, cross-armed and confident, knowing he has the regressor wrapped around his finger, teasing him so hard that the poor guy literally gets nervous stomach cramps while Hyun panics like he's dying, before Kaiyang wraps up the meeting, telling everyone to rest up and meet in front of his room in 15 minutes, walking them to the door while calculating how to maximize his administrative power once they officially join, though he notices Hyunsung looking unusually downcast as he walks away, leaving the regressor to insert his key into his own door, turning it with a quiet click as his face falls into a weary, heavy expression, stepping into a spacious guest room flooded with the blood-red light of the setting sun, touching the cold wooden frame as the silence of the room settles in, his footsteps echoing softly on the floor as the red sunset triggers a massive wave of trauma. Standing behind the wooden screen as the memories of his first life come crashing back. Hearing the phantom screams of his dying comrades echoing in his head. Visualizing a blood-splattered ally begging him to run away and save himself. While he stood there in his pristine uniform crying and apologizing for his ultimate failure. Remembering the swinging legs of a hanged ally and the bitter accusations of failing to protect Hyan. A chaotic montage of weeping faces attacks by the masked people and reddish-haired warriors declaring humanity's doom. Leaving him sitting defeated in a ruined guild hall drenched in the blood of his friends. Looking out over a silent, dead battlefield that he couldn't save. With the word Guildmaster echoing like a glitchy mocking chorus of his past failures. In a silent dark void of pure psychological torment. As he stands in the quiet room, whispering a broken apology to the ghosts of his past. Until a dark smiling white mask materializes in his mind mocking his helplessness. Snapping him back to reality with a violent gasp, his eyes wide with lingering terror. As he covers his face taking ragged breaths to steady his racing heart. Letting a single bitter tear fall before the warm smiling faces of his new party flash in his mind. Remembering the innocent determined smile of the Hyan he failed to save. As his blue eyes lock forward with an unbreakable ironclad resolve to save everyone this time. Waking up to the peaceful chirping of birds outside the Blue Guild's lavish estate. Which is a massive contrast to the cold hard stone floors of the tutorial dungeon we just escaped. And while Kim Hyunsung stands by the window wrestling with his tragic past life trauma, Kyeong is already moving. Opening his door only to find Young Hyan lingering right outside like a beautifully packaged jump scare. Which instantly forces him to switch on his classic manipulative nice guy persona before she realizes he's terrified of her Yandra tendencies. As she blushes and admits she wanted to walk to the recruitment interviews together, casually sniffing him like a literal bloodhound. There is zero time to unpack that because the recruitment officials are already calling out Hyunsung's name. Prompting the regressor to head inside first while Kyeong curses their individual interview setup knowing it prevents them from presenting a unified front. And when a massive thud of applause echoes through the heavy golden doors, Kyeong realizes this is a performance test. Which only spikes his anxiety as Hyan is called in next to showcase her SSS rank magical talent. Leaving our master scammer sitting on the couch, while Park Dyaku is summoned to show off his high-end tanking stats. And now Kyeong is looking like a total fraud sweating bullets like how my card declined at Denny's right after I told my girl I'd buy her the world terrified his status as the group's physical burden is about to be exposed. But when they finally call his name, he forces a calm reply and steps forward desperately trying to reassure himself that his high intelligence and actual magic power should still command some basic respect from these high-ranking officials. Only to find himself standing at the bottom of a towering cold auditorium filled with silent staring guild members. Looking down at him like he's a piece of cheap livestock up for auction. As the elderly team leader Lee Seal-ho looks over his documents with a deeply skeptical squint questioning his alchemist class. Which Kyeong politely explains was a strategic choice to gain utility magic rather than sticking to a basic combat role. But his explanation is met with quiet mocking snickers from the upper benches immediately grinding his gears. Before Seal-ho condescendingly lectures him on how terrible the alchemist class is for transmigrants demanding to know his magic power stat. And when Kyeong drops the number 8, Seal-ho literally bursts into a mocking laugh, while Lee Sang-hee watches in tense silence. Prompting the old man to call his growth abnormally slow, which Kyeong quickly deflects by comparing himself to the genius magician Hyan. Which Seal-ho quickly accepts, leaving Kyeong internally seething that these arrogant fools are writing him off without even a practical test. Before Seal-ho casually throws out a mediocre contract of 1,500 gold a 7-year term and a basic salary, adding that he will be treated like his elite teammates to a certain extent, leaving Kyeong completely stunned by the audacity. Especially when another official chimes in arguing that even 1,000 gold is a waste on a non-combatant alchemist, claiming they're only offering him a contract out of respect for his team, assuming he just got lucky in the dungeon. Which makes Kyeong glare at them quietly, opening his status window while his dark cynical pragmatism starts kicking in. Realizing that because they lack his mind's eye they can only judge him by his low magic stat and useless class. Meaning they are completely blind to his true potential and the absolute psychological leverage he holds over the party. Even as Lee Sang-hee overrides the insults, offering him solid benefits, childbirth subsidies, and a dedicated research lab, along with personal coaching from an experienced alchemist to help him grow. Which causes a female official to gasp in protest, though Sang-hee firmly states she believes in his potential as a historic conqueror. And while Kyeong respects Sang-hee's professional attitude, his eyes drift back to the corrupt old men whispering nearby, who are actively plotting to lower his contract fee because they assume the close-knit party will never split up anyway. Triggering a wave of disgust in Kyeong's mind as he touches his chin, realizing how rotten these corporate negotiators are. Though he knows their logic is usually correct since standard dungeon comrades split up over money and status all the time. Kyeong knows his party is a completely different beast. Imagining the sheer hilarious impossibility of his loyal companions turning on him for a quick payout. Like Dyaku suddenly becoming a shirtless greedy mercenary claiming that money rules the world, or Hyan coldly ignoring him for a date, or Hyunsung choosing to talk to a tiny ant instead of his trusted strategist. Which is completely out of the question since their symbiotic Yandra-fueled bond is far tighter than these fools can comprehend. And this realization turns his anger into a cold predatory smirk knowing their low expectations are actually massive financial leverage. So he puts on a humble, polite smile and tells them the terms look pretty good, which makes Sealho lean in with a sleazy grin, believing he has successfully cowed the rookie, whispering that if Kyoung puts in a good word with his teammates to sign with Blue, they will slide him extra compensation on the side. But Kyoung plays dumb, giving a relaxed shrug and saying he doesn't know about that, stating he needs more time to consider his options, which instantly panics the old man because the grand demonstration is next week, as the negotiators frantically whisper, terrified that this super rookie party might get poached by a rival guild. And as Kyoung prepares to leave, his eyes narrow, connecting the demonstration to the competitive bidding war Hyunsung mentioned, before saying he rushes forward to hand him the official guild catalog and contract manuscripts to help him decide, while Sealho watches him walk away, muttering bitterly about how arrogant greenhorns will ruin the guild. But as Kyoung steps into the quiet hallway, he doesn't even bother looking at the papers, knowing that within the next few days he is going to force them to rewrite every single word.